Chapter 2261. In an instant, Seito felt his body tighten. It was as if all the power of heaven and earth had been added to the stone seal. It once again smashed onto Seito's body. Bang! Seito's feet shook and immediately sank into the ground. Only a small part of his body remained outside. Heavenly Sword, go! Seeing that he was about to be suppressed into the ground, Seito sent out Heavenly Sword with a thought. The latter immediately turned into a white ray of light. After drawing a beautiful arc in the air, it shot towards Diyuang. Diyuang waved his golden dagger axe and knocked Heavenly Sword to the side with a clang. However, the Heavenly Sword was not discouraged at all. It circled in the air and straightened its body. Then, it split into dozens and hundreds of white sword lights that were difficult to distinguish between real and illusory. They flew toward Diyuang from all directions. The angles were strange and tricky. Even Diyuang felt that it was difficult to deal with. He had no choice but to use his tough body to take it head-on when it was not important. He had to pay the smallest price in exchange for a greater victory. For a moment, ding ding dang dang sounds echoed in the sky above the divine farm shelf. However, although Diyuang was forced into a difficult situation by Heavenly Sword, he did not delay what he needed to do. He continued to use his Fali and let the stone seal suppress Seito. A moment later, with a loud boom, Seito was once again suppressed into the ground. Golden rays of light flew and turned into golden runes that entered the stone seal. After finishing off Seito, Diyuang waved his golden dagger axe again. With the support of his Fali, it brought about a powerful hurricane. In an instant, the Heavenly Sword that was flying around him was blown away. The illusory rays of sword light were destroyed and the Heavenly Sword's true body was revealed. Diyuang then grabbed with his hand and a large vital energy hand appeared. Heavenly Sword was captured in his hand. No matter how much the Heavenly Sword struggled, it was unable to escape. "It's a good sword," Diyuang praised as he looked at the Heavenly Sword in his hand. The Heavenly Sword was glowing with Dao runes. But soon after, Diyuang's expression changed as he hurriedly raised his arm to block. Bang! Yuan Qi exploded. Diyuang's body flew out at high speed. Then, Itosei, who had appeared out of nowhere, replaced Diyuang and stood on top of the bull dragon on top of the stone seal. He stretched out his hand and took back the Heavenly Sword that had broken free. As expected of the Yen Emperor's treasure, I almost couldn't escape. Seito sighed as he stepped on the stone seal. It turned out that when Diyuang used the seal to suppress him for the second time, Seito, who had already felt the difference in the power of the seal, did not choose to take it head-on. He immediately used the earth shield substitution technique and turned his Dharma idol into an earth puppet. His real body used the Taoist earth movement technique to enter the ground and escape from the other side. This was the main reason why Diyuang was able to suppress him back underground so quickly. But who would have thought that Diyuang's power was so strong? After suppressing him, it immediately went through the stone seal to Seito's Dharma idol and sealed its power. If Seito had not escaped quickly enough, he might have really been suppressed by it. But just as he finished speaking, the heavenly bull that he had mercilessly stepped on suddenly came to life and roared. It opened its mouth and swallowed Seito, who was caught off guard. Then, it started to swim in the sky like a real dragon. Roar. But in the next moment, there was a muffled boom. A dazzling platinum-colored light shot out from under the bull dragon's abdomen. It sliced across the bull dragon's abdomen like a large knife. A huge gash several meters long appeared on the bull dragon's abdomen. Large amounts of golden red blood gushed out from the wound. Then, a ray of light shot out from the heavenly bull's body and appeared in midair. Who else could it be if it was not Seito? Then, Seito, who had reappeared, raised his hand and threw out a thick gray lightning bolt from his hand. It instantly flew in front of the heavenly bull that was still tumbling in the sky. It directly bombarded its body. Boom! lightning flashed, and the heavenly bull roared in pain as it flew back to the stone seal. It turned back into the stone statue on the seal. But compared to before, there was a long, long scar on the heavenly bull's abdomen. However, there was a long crack on its body. Apparently, it was the wound that Ito-sei had left on its body. At this moment, Di-Yuang flew forward with his golden spear raised high, and smashed it down with enough force to split a mountain. Sei-Ito raised his sword and blocked in front of him. Clang! In the sound of metal clashing, Ito-sei's feet paused, and his body sank slightly. But then, Sei-Ito raised his left hand and shot out a scarlet fire divine lightning at Di-Yuang. And because the two were extremely close, the divine lightning instantly struck Di-Yuang's body. Boom! Lightning flashed, and Di-Yuang involuntarily flew back from the explosion of lightning. However, Ito-sei, who had regained the upper hand, did not show any mercy. With a flick of his hand, the tripartite tranquility ring made of red, green, and yellow light was thrown into the air above Di-Yuang. It shot out star sand and thunder fire, bombarding Di-Yuang's body like a rain of rain. Crackle, crackle. Rumble, rumble. In almost an instant, Di-Yuang was drowned in the heavenly star lightning fire. Seeing this, Sei-Ito frowned and used the power of space to dim the colors. It was obvious that the tripartite purity ring had been badly beaten, and he summoned it back to his Rubik's Cube world. Then, Ito-sei felt the ground beneath his feet become empty, and the huge stone seal under his feet suddenly shrank back to its original size. It turned into a stream of light and flew back into the body of Di-Yuang, who had transformed into a bull-headed giant. At the same time, Sei-Ito's hand moved again, and the green mirage bottle, which was also dimmed and had cracks on it, was taken back. He threw it into the Rubik's Cube world to nourish it. For a moment, the two of them were like opponents who were about to stop fighting. They both kept their magic treasures, and did not look like they were about to start a life and death battle. Then, Sei-Ito's body shook, and a large amount of energy of heaven and earth rushed towards him as if it was free. It quickly wrapped Sei-Ito into a white-colored cocoon, and after 3 to 4 seconds, it tore open. Then, Sei-Ito, who was also 9 feet tall, appeared from within. He faced Di-Yuang, who was holding a huge golden dagger axe. "Let's fight in the sky. If we fight here, we can forget about this land." Sei-Ito looked at the Shenangjia forest below and said indifferently, "Okay," Di-Yuang said in a muffled voice. Then, the two of them did not hesitate. One turned into a ray of light, while the other turned into a black cloud, and shot towards the sky. In the blink of an eye, they were 10,000 meters above the ground in the clouds. "Let's fight here," Di-Yuang said indifferently after stopping. "Okay," Sei-Ito agreed. Then, the aura of the two of them rose, stirring up the surrounding space. Under the surging aura of the two of them, the originally clear sky began to be filled with dark clouds. The wind howled, and bright lightning flashed through the dark clouds from time to time, bringing with it loud rumbles that shook the void. The two of them seemed to be attracted by the lightning, and were bombarded by the lightning from time to time. However, the two of them were people with strong bodies. The natural lightning that did not have the power of calamity or the aura of the law was like an itch to them. It did not matter, and they enjoyed the bombardment of the lightning as if they were masochistic perverts. Suddenly, the two of them moved at the same time and collided with each other like two rays of light. Boom! A loud rumble that was louder than the thunder resounded from between the two of them. The shock wave surged, and tore the surrounding dark clouds and lightning into pieces. One of them was the ancient war emperor, a powerful wizard who was proficient in the wizard tribe's techniques. Although his strength was only at the peak of the golden immortal realm, his majestic aura was not weaker than an ordinary Tai expert. The other was a hero of the age. The power in his hands was complicated and strange, and he was also strong in combat. He also had many magical treasures and divine weapons. Even his realm was comparable to Di-Yuang after he unleashed his full power. It was really a well-matched match. The two of them were like ancient demon gods that had reappeared in the world, and they fought fiercely in the sky. Who are the two people in the sky? How can they be so strong? Tai, they are actually Tai immortals. How is that possible? Isn't Earth unable to accommodate Tai existences? This aura. How is that possible? The East. I didn't expect such powerful gods to appear in the East at this time. Looks like we have to speed up. And so on and so forth. Discussions like these continuously spread from the mouths of experts all over Earth. However, no matter what they said or did, they could not disturb Diyuang and Sei Ito in the sky. They even prayed that the battle between the two of them would end quickly. They did not want to lose their lives because of the aftermath of the battle between the two mighty beings in the sky. The world shook and thunder rumbled. Strong winds wreaked havoc in the sky above Asia like bandits taking advantage of the chaos. It made the citizens of the countries below feel like they were in the middle of the apocalypse. This battle lasted for 3 to 4 days. It wasn't until the evening of the 5th day that a figure flew through the air like a meteor and landed on the ground. Boom! A huge roar sounded, and a mushroom cloud rose from the ground like an atomic explosion. Chapter 2262. The one who was knocked to the ground was Diyuang. As mentioned earlier, one side was the ancient war emperor, a powerful wizard who was proficient in the wizard tribe's techniques. His strength could reach the level of Tai. On one side, Tensei was a hero of the present age. He had many strange powers under his control, and many powerful treasures and divine artifacts. Added with the fact that he was at the same level as Diyuang, after 5 days of fierce fighting, Diyuang, who had consumed too much of his energy, was finally punched to the ground by Itosei. Emperor! At this moment, 2 earth-shaking roars were heard. 2 streams of light, one blue and one gold, shot to Diyuang, who was deep in a crater. They were none other than the last 2 wizard tribesmen who Feng Xiao and the others wanted to contact at all costs, Gonggong Yu and Rushimu. How dare you hurt my emperor? Die! Next, the tall and sturdy golden-haired man, Rushimu, who had been half-kneeling beside Diyuang, abruptly turned around and growled at Itosei, who was floating in the air. He was releasing a strong golden power vibration. After that, he turned into a stream of golden light and rushed into the sky. Moo! Gonggong Yu shouted. However, he was still a step too late. Rushimu, who had used all his strength, had already rushed to Sei Ito. The wind from his fist was whistling, and with a sharp metal will that could cut through space, he smashed towards Sei Ito's head. Of course, Rushimu had also turned into a giant, showing the Rushu tribe's unique Rushu tribesman form. He had a human face, a tiger body, golden scales, a pair of wings, a snake pierced through his left ear, and 2 dragons under his feet. Sei Ito's feet flashed, and he appeared behind Rushimu. He crossed his hands to form a hammer. He smashed it hard on the back of Rushimu's neck. Bang! In an instant, Rushimu fell to the ground at about the same speed as when he came. Boom! A huge roar sounded, and a huge mushroom cloud rose from the ground again. Let's go together. Diyuang, who had recovered some of his strength, and Gonggong Yu looked at each other. He said in a deep voice, "All right." Gonggong Yu agreed. Then, the 2 of them flew into the sky together. Meanwhile, Gonggong Yu's body began expanding. In midair, he transformed into the real Gonggong, who had a boa head and a human body, and was covered in black scales. He trod on a black dragon, and had a cyan boa coiled around his hands. 2 more appeared. How is that possible? How could there be so many primordial experts on Earth? At the same time, due to the outburst of Gonggong Yu and Jishomu, the experts on Earth once again felt frightened. Their faces involuntarily revealed expressions of disbelief. Good. Seeing Diyuang and Gonggong Yu attacking at the same time, Sei Ito shouted loudly. Then, with a sway of his body, Another head and 4 limbs grew out from his back and left and right sides of his head respectively. It was as if there were 3 people fighting against Di Wang and Gong Gong Yu. It was the divine ability, 3 heads 6 arms. Thunder-like muffled bangs and intense vitality spread out in the sky. The clouds in the sky were torn apart even more. One could even faintly see the starry sky of the universe. Then, Jishoumu flew up and joined in the siege against Seito. For a moment, Seito suddenly felt the pressure increase by a lot. After all, although he had 3 heads and 6 arms, he only had 2 legs. He could not compare to Di Wang, Gong Gong Yu, and Jishoumu who had 6 legs. Moreover, Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu were stepping on snakes and dragons. It really made Seito feel a little tired dealing with them. Knowing that this could not go on, Seito roared, "Ja!" He forced Di Wang and the other 2 to retreat. Then, with a flash of his body, a person with 3 heads and 6 arms appeared. He transformed into 3 people with only 1 head and 2 arms. Each of them faced Di Wang, Gong Gong Yu, and Jishoumu respectively. Magic light flashed. All kinds of beautiful and powerful spells and attacks appeared in the sky one after another, illuminating the sky with all kinds of colors. However, this situation did not last for long. At this moment, a thunderous bang sounded. Di Wang, who was not in his peak condition, was punched by Seito again. He flew to the ground like a cannonball. Boom! Then, an astonishing heavy sound was heard, and a huge mushroom cloud rose from the ground once again. Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu, who saw Di Wang fly away, shouted, "Do you have time to care about others? Why don't you care about yourselves?" The 2 Seito who were fighting Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu said coldly. Then, Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu felt their bodies tighten. They were restrained by an invisible force. "What's going on?" Jishoumu roared. The 2 Seito did not answer. They turned into a stream of light and shot into Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu's mouths under their shocked gazes. They entered their bodies through their windpipes. Then, their expressions changed and they let out miserable shrieks with faces full of pain. "Ah!" Afterward, dark energy storms surged out from Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu's bodies, leaving thin slashes on their strong bodies. Their skins were dried and wrinkled like old tree bark. Following a series of popping noise, those dark energy storms peeled off their bodies, tearing out large pieces of flesh from their bodies. Even the strong-willed shamans who dared to fight the world could not help but scream in pain. They screamed even more miserably than before. Fortunately, Ito-sei didn't have the hobby of torturing the enemy. After using the time turbulence storm to imprison Gong Gong Yu and Rushimu, and tearing off the outermost layer of powerful defense on their bodies, he reached out his hand and summoned the surrounding thunderbolts. He directly blasted them towards Gong Gong Yu and Rushimu, who were in pain and almost unable to resist. Boom! Lightning flashed and formed a huge ball of lightning, enveloping Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu. Ah! At this moment, Di Wang flew into the air again. He swung his golden spear and struck the ball of lightning. In a split second, with a rip, the ball of lightning exploded, filling the sky with electricity and shooting in all directions. Afterwards, the charred figures of Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu reappeared in the sky. Their auras were weak, and there was not a single piece of intact flesh on their bodies. Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu reappeared in the sky. "Yu Mu!" Di Wang cried out in grief. His voice was filled with uncontrollable fury. Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu called out in low voices. However, before the 2 of them had finished speaking, a streak of silver light suddenly shot out of the air. It flashed past Gong Gong Yu and Jishoumu's necks like lightning. In the next moment, there was a muffled puff sound. 2 charred heads flew into the air under the spurt of a fountain of blood. Immediately after, thunder roared, instantly enveloping the floating head and the body below. "Yu! Mu!" Di Wang roared out. After the lightning, Gong Gong Yu and Zhe Shou Mu's corpses disappeared into the air like the 6 other shamans who had come down with them. Chen Shicheng. Di Yuang raised his head to look at the space before him and roared out through gritted teeth. His voice was like thunder, instantly spreading through the entire sky. The people who had been paying attention to the battle in the sky all deeply remembered this name. Of course, the names Di, Yu and Mu were also remembered. However, the latter two were already useless. Afterwards, Di Yuang swung his golden spear in the air and slashed out a sharp streak of golden light. It directly cut through the space in front of him, forcing Sei Ito out of the space. As expected, the dimensional space is of no use to people with primordial spirits. Sei Ito, who had been forced out of the dimensional space by Di Yuang, sighed in his heart. Even though he had been mentally prepared for this, Sei Ito still felt a little regretful when it really came down to it. "Give me your life!" Then, Di Yuang roared and flew in front of Sei Ito like an arrow. He swung his spear, creating streaks of sharp blades and lightning that attacked Sei Ito from all directions. "You've slowed down," Sei Ito said softly. Then, his body turned into a dozen figures that looked exactly the same but with different postures and actions. They launched a counterattack against Di Yuang. Di Yuang was not to be outdone. He spun the spear in his hand into a circle, enveloping him like a golden ball. At the same time, the head of the spear poked out from time to time, attacking Sei Ito from all directions. In an instant, a series of ding ding dang dang sounds reverberated in the sky. However, just as Sei Ito had said, Di Yuang's speed was not as fast as when he was at his peak after expending a large amount of energy. Furthermore, he was filled with anger and had lost his cool, so there were openings in his attacks from time to time. Therefore, it did not take long before Sei Ito forced him to throw away his golden spear. Then, Sei Ito waved his hand and grabbed Di Yuang's golden spear, throwing it into the Rubik's Cube world. If it could be said that Di Yuang could still put up a fight with the spear in his hand, then without the golden spear, Di Yuang was a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Not long after, Sei Ito used a spell to bind his hands and feet, and he fell into Sei Ito's hands like a stick. "Winner takes all. I didn't think that I would be defeated by you just after I was born, before I even had the chance to establish my great cause. Looks like this is my destiny after all. Forget it." After a moment of silence, Di Yuang, who had returned to his human form, sighed dejectedly. "You don't need to be depressed. You still have a chance," Sei Ito, who had also shrunk back to his human form, said calmly. Di Yuang frowned and looked at Sei Ito in confusion. Chapter 2263. P.S. Thanks to Only Know How to Bully I'm Honest for his precious monthly votes and Crystal Pendant for his tip. Now you have 2 choices. First, I'll send you to the Earth Immortal Realm, but you have to swear that you won't return to Earth. Second, I'll seal you for 10 years, and you have to wait 10 years before you come out and start your hegemony. But no matter which option you choose, you have to promise that the karma between us will end here. Otherwise, I'll have to disregard our kinship and destroy your soul. Sei Ito said flatly. Di Yuang frowned, and his expression quickly changed as if he was performing a classic face-changing performance. Sei Ito didn't rush him, and waited quietly for Di Yuang to make his choice. "I choose the second option." After a while, Di Yuang sighed. "As long as you do as you say, the karma between you and I will end here." "All right." Sei Ito nodded decisively. This result was more or less what he expected. After all, while the Earth Immortal Realm was good and had the Witch Tribe's army there, the Immortals and Buddhists' main camp was there as well. Therefore, while Di Yuang gained the support of the Gung family, he had to face more difficulties and obstacles. Moreover, Daluo could move freely there, and Daofathers and Paragons sat high up in the sky. It really wasn't an ideal place to cause trouble. On the other hand, Earth was different. While it was a small place, it was filled with many factions. There were countless members of the Eastern and Western immortal sects, and it was a chaotic place that gave people headache. Even after 10 years, there might not be any major faction that could unify Earth. This provided an ideal environment for Di Yuang to cause trouble in the future, and it wasn't hard to imagine why he chose to accept the seal and stay on Earth. One had to know that for cultivators of the path of refinement, 10 years wasn't very long. 10 years really wasn't a long time. Perhaps it would pass in just one sitting. Not to mention refining treasures or cultivating divine abilities and secret technique. Which one of them didn't require 100 to 80 years? Moreover, Di Yuang had been awakened by a disturbance. Fortunately, his cultivation hadn't reached perfection yet. Otherwise, how could he have the strength of a mere golden immortal after sleeping for thousands of years? At the very least, he should have the foundation of Tai. These 10 years of being sealed just happened to be enough for him to refine his cultivation and cultivate the grand technique to perfection. Don't resist, Seito said softly and cast a sealing technique on Di Yuang. He didn't seem to have done anything, but golden Taoist talismans appeared in the air. They shot towards Di Yuang as if his body was some kind of gold-absorbing object. Then, it merged into Di Yuang's body like water. In just a few moments, Di Yuang had turned into a golden statue that looked like a golden statue. Then, Seito casually slapped Di Yuang, who had turned into a golden man, into the ground below. Boom! Then, a ripple lit up, and the area where Di Yuang's golden body was located was suddenly disrupted with the surrounding space, and it was separated from Earth's space. In that case, unless a Zenith Heaven immortal personally came, it would be impossible for him to escape. Otherwise, no one would be able to find Di Yuang's existence on Earth. They would have to wait 10 years until the space ruptured before they could see him again. After dealing with Di Yuang, Seito didn't stay in the sky for long. After glancing at Japan, he disappeared from the sky in a flash. The next moment, Ito Sei's figure suddenly appeared in front of a space-time disorder area in the ice of the Himalayas. Then, he walked forward. He flashed into the area where space and time were disrupted, and disappeared from Earth's space. A few moments later, Seito appeared in the Amani Hall. "Sir." The guards in the Amani Hall bowed their heads and greeted. "Call everyone here," Seito said softly. "Yes," a guard replied. Then, he turned around and shouted, "Gather!" His voice was like thunder, echoing throughout the grand hall of Amani. Then, in less than half a minute, 200 guards appeared in the spacious hall. They stood in a square formation in front of Seito. "Sir, everyone is here," the guard reported. Seito nodded slightly and gestured for the guard to step down. Then, he looked up at the guards in front of him and said softly, "I announce that from now on, the alert mission is lifted." Hearing this, the guards' expressions changed, but they still didn't say anything. They continued to look at Seito in a respectful manner. "Choose a team." Then, Seito turned to the commander of the guards and said, "Yes." The commander replied and turned to look at the guards. Soon, a 5-man combat team was chosen by the commander. Seito asked them to step aside for the time being. With a thought, he sent the remaining 200 guards back to the Rubik's Cube world. In an instant, the spacious Armani Hall became even more spacious and quiet. "I'm going to retreat here. From now on, my safety is in your hands," Seito said to the remaining guards. "Yes, sir, don't worry. Even if we have to risk our lives, we will protect Sir's safety." The 5 selected soldiers knelt down on one knee and promised in a solemn voice. "I believe in you." Seito smiled. Then, without saying anything, he turned around and walked to the Akasha domain. He entered the domain and disappeared in front of the 5 guards. A few minutes later, Seito walked to the Akasha system's core light sphere. Then, he summoned a shadow clone and flashed into the Rubik's Cube world. Retreat was a retreat, but this time, Seito didn't plan to just sit there in a daze under the Akasha system. After all, this time, he was just browsing the Akasha system's universe information to comprehend the name of the stars and increase his cultivation. He wasn't going to instill world force into it to increase its strength. So, a shadow clone was enough. When the various worlds in the Rubik's Cube world produced enough world force, it wouldn't be too late for him to come out and inject it. Just like this, Seito used the shadow clone's memory-sharing characteristic to half-leisurely enter seclusion under the Akasha system. And this seclusion lasted for nearly a year. Until one day, when Seito, who was instilling world force into the Akasha system, felt the world tremble. Only then did he break away from the comfortable seclusion where he spent time with girls. The dimension ascension is finally complete. Seito, who left the Amani Hall and reappeared in the main world of Earth, sighed with emotion as he felt the new environment in front of him was clearly different from before. Then, he leaped into the sky. He flew into the sky and observed the changes of the entire Earth. There were two main changes. First, the space around the Earth had become tougher. If it could only withstand the power of a golden immortal before, then it could now withstand the power of a Tai immortal. Moreover, the vitality was abundant. Although it wasn't necessarily comparable to those spiritual mountains, it wasn't worse than the normal environment in the Earth immortal realm. In terms of vitality concentration, it was even a little higher. Second, some of the laws had changed. For example, a punch that could shatter a rock could now only leave a deep fist mark on the rock. But correspondingly, some of the laws had become much clearer. It was no longer as hazy as before, where it required a lot of effort to discover, come into contact with, and comprehend. Now, as long as one's primordial spirit was formed, they could quickly capture it. This also meant that Earth would usher in an explosive period of cultivators, and a large number of cultivators would benefit from the current changes. And the result was that more immortals, Buddhas, gods, and devils descended on Earth, making the already chaotic forces on Earth even more chaotic. Almost every few thousand kilometers, he would encounter a sect of a force. This point, even the extremely cold Himalayas was no exception. At least, Seito casually swept through and found 4 or 5 Buddhist, Taoist, or unorthodox cultivation forces. Of course, these had a lot to do with Seito. What was really worth his attention was the situation of the dimensional sea. Rubik's Cube, has the dimensional sea stabilized? Seito, who had roughly observed the changes of Earth, thought to himself. It hasn't stopped. Currently, it's undergoing the final dimensional change. What about the new world that replaced Earth as the stable core of the dimensional sea? Seito asked again. It's undergoing the final upgrade. Seito nodded slightly. He didn't ask further, but the Rubik's Cube gave a rare follow-up. But there's not just one newly born core world. There are many of them. What's the situation? Seito asked in surprise. Several worlds have received frequent infusions of world force during this dimensional upgrade and have met the upgrade conditions. They have evolved into core worlds. Therefore, these worlds have become the new stable core. What effect does this have on the dimensional sea? Seito asked with concern. The effect is unknown. According to speculation, there's an 80% chance that it will cause the dimensional sea to split and form several new dimensional regions. What about the effect on us? Seito immediately asked. None. That's good. Seito breathed a sigh of relief. Then, Seito jumped in the direction of Japan, squinted his eyes, and said coldly, "But since we're already out, let's go out for a walk and settle the karma between myself, Amaterasu, and Inagawa God." After saying that, his figure flashed and disappeared into the sky. The next moment, Seito's figure appeared in the 9 states of Huaxia. Like an ordinary person, he strolled around the 9 states world that had completely changed. At this time, the traces of technological products in the Nine States world had decreased by a lot. Instead, there were a bunch of new products that had both the style of technology and the traces of cultivation that could be described as cultivation technology. For example, a mobile phone with 1,000 miles sound transmission array. For example, a small car with a floating array. For example, a 3D movie theater with an illusion effect. And so on and so forth. There was a wide variety of things that were no worse than the original era of technology. In fact, they were even better. Other than that, the people on the streets had all changed out of their modern Western-style clothes. They had changed into modern ancient clothes that were full of classical Oriental charm, but not lacking in convenience. It made the whole of Huaxia look as if it had really returned to the ancient times. However, these changes were not the biggest. The biggest change was the ordinary people on the street. Regardless of their age or gender, there was more or less qi in their body, showing their identity as a cultivator. The only difference was that some people might practice the crop fighting style, or the common taiji fist and xingyi fist. Some people might be lucky enough to obtain the cultivation inheritance. It seems that the batch of martial arts secret books that were flooding the internet at that time has become an important key to triggering the cultivation of the whole nation. Sei-Ito, who saw all this, secretly said in his heart, "If it weren't for this, Sei-Ito would never believe that this group of cultivators from the Earth Immortal world would be so kind as to pass on their martial arts and cultivation methods to the outside world so that every ordinary person could become a cultivator." And the fact was indeed as Sei-Ito thought. As early as when the world first changed and the vitality soared, some people who had more or less opened the spiritual circuit in their bodies discovered the fact that they could cultivate internal qi by practicing the martial arts that were circulating on the internet. However, because of the selfishness of human nature, they kept it a secret and only spread it among a small group of people. However, with the subsequent large frequency conversion and the surge of vitality, more people discovered this situation. Then, a selfless person among them made it public, thus triggering the first wave of cultivation craze. Fortunately, although the international network was disconnected at that time due to the Earth transformation, the city's local area network, provincial network, and so on were more or less still available. In addition to adding fuel to the fire by adding fuel to the fire, this news was successfully made known to most people in China. When the cultivators from the upper realm found out about this situation and wanted to ban it, it was impossible. They could only allow the people of the 9 regions to enter the era of universal cultivation. Of course, since it was just a joke spread on the internet, it was difficult to distinguish whether it was real or fake. In addition, there was no one to guide them. Therefore, most people who cultivated internal qi were unable to go further. Therefore, if they wanted to become a master, in addition to those with heaven-defying talent and perception, they could only ask for help from the various sects or the previous martial arts masters. This also made the cultivators from the upper realm somewhat happy and changed their mind. Instead, they recultivated the cultivation methods and secret books among the people to help speed up the arrival of the era of national cultivation. As for the reason, Sei-Ito guessed that it was probably easier for them to select the foundation so that they would not make a mistake in accepting people with poor qualifications. After that, Sei-Ito strolled around the streets for a long time. After feeling the changes in Huaxia, he activated his teleportation and left the street. He directly appeared in Tokyo, Japan, in front of his apartment that had been rebuilt and lived in. Then, just like when he was in Huaxia, he strolled around the streets of New Tokyo City. Just like Huaxia, the entire Tokyo City had undergone significant changes. However, unlike the progressive Huaxia, the tall buildings in Tokyo City had been knocked down one after another and replaced. Once again, it was restored to the ancient appearance of the Edo period. Chapter 2264. Stop! A very rude reprimand came from afar. Seito turned around and looked in the direction of the voice. Not far in front of him, several arrogant-looking men dressed in warrior clothes with long swords at their waists were walking towards him. "Are you talking to me?" Seito raised his eyebrows. "How dare you talk to Master Jiro like that?" Next to the leader of the samurai, a short samurai with a strange hairstyle that only ancient Japanese could shave, shouted angrily. Seito frowned and looked at the samurai who spoke. In an instant the samurai felt pain in his eyes. He instinctively raised his hand to cover his eyes and let out a miserable scream. "Ah!" Then blood dripped down from the short samurai's palm. "Mao Ching Wei." The other samurai's expression changed greatly. Bang! Then all the samurai pulled out their swords and pointed at Seito, shouting, "Peasant, kneel down with your hands on your head." "Ah, my good mood is ruined by you." Seito sighed helplessly. Then, he waved his arm as if he was swatting flies, and several wind blades suddenly appeared in front of the warriors in front of him. In an instant, the wind blades swept across their bodies, cutting them into several pieces. Bang, 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 then the broken corpses fell to the ground and sputtered a large amount of bright red blood. "Ah!" Immediately, screams full of fear came from the mouths of the surrounding pedestrians. It was also at this time that Seito noticed that the surrounding people were wearing kimonos. Men, women, old, and young were all the same. Coupled with the surrounding remodeled buildings that were like the ancient buildings of the Edo period, it really was like being in the Edo period. No wonder they came to me as soon as they appeared. It turns out that I'm too special. Seito looked back and forth between himself and the surrounding pedestrians for a while, and suddenly realized. What a bunch of gods with a wicked sense of humor. Forget it, I'll go and deal with them now. After that, Seito's figure flashed and disappeared from the street. At the same time, in the dimensional space, Seito waved his arm, and the timeline of the Japanese archipelago emerged from the void, like a large net that connected the sky and the earth, appearing in front of him. Seito then spread out his spiritual force and browsed through the time beads in front of him. It didn't take long for Ito-sei to find the image of Inato Kami. Then, he dispelled the other timelines and listed out the parts related to Inari Kami. Almost as soon as he listed out the timeline of Inari God, who was in the god space of Inari Taisha, frowned. He waved his hand and threw out a bunch of white coins. Then, the coin that was thrown out by Inari God suddenly burst into flames and turned into a pile of white ashes, fluttering down to the ground. But at this moment the void suddenly trembled. A shock wave that was visible to the naked eye appeared out of nowhere, blowing away all the ashes in the sky. Inari Kami opened the golden fan in his hand and blocked in front of him, squinting his eyes and looking forward. He didn't know when. Seito's figure suddenly appeared in Inari Kami's divine residence. "It's you." Half of Inari Kami's face was covered by the golden fan, and his voice was full of anger and anger. "Long time no see, Inari Kami." Seito smiled and said, "What are you doing here? Also, how did you enter my divine residence?" Inari Kami squinted his eyes and asked. "Divine residence." As the name implied, it was the residence of God. In other words, it was the absolute domain of God, the kingdom of God, unless he accepted the invitation. Normally, it was impossible to enter another god's divine residence, unless he used force. But doing so would be equivalent to declaring war, and it could only be done when the god wasn't in the divine residence. But now, the situation was obviously different. Inari Kami was in her divine residence. Even so, Ito Mori still inexplicably broke into her divine residence without alerting her. Inari Kami had to pay attention to this. If she didn't ask clearly, she wouldn't dare to stay in her divine residence in the future. What if this happened again? Would she still be able to live? Of course, to understand the karma between us. Seito smiled and said, "As for why I can enter your divine residence, It's because I came in with you. Impossible! Inari Kami screamed. Nothing is impossible. Just because you can't do it, it doesn't mean that I can't do it. Sei Ito said lightly. Fine. So what if you can enter? This is my divine residence, it's my territory. Since you came to me, I'll fulfill your wish. I can use your divine title to fulfill my wish. Inari Kami laughed. As her voice fell, the entire shrine, which was originally showing the soft color of the sun, suddenly changed. It became as dark as the earth. A large number of spiders, foxes, dogs, wolves, and other animals, as well as samurai and witches, emerged from the void and roared as they rushed towards Ito-sei. At the same time, Inari Kami closed her golden fan and pointed it at the void. Then, a large number of golden arrows appeared in the void and shot towards Sei Ito like rain. But at this moment, Sei Ito, who was in the middle of the attack, suddenly appeared behind Inari Kami. He reached out his hand and grabbed Inari Kami's soft neck. Ugh! Inari Kami felt her throat tighten and her expression changed. She let out a muffled groan. Let me go. Then, Inari Kami's expression changed and she said weakly, I'm willing to swear my loyalty to you from now on. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in you. Just give me your power. Sei Ito said lightly. Then, with a thought, a large number of golden lights appeared around Inari Kami. They were like dust-like stars, revolving around Inari Kami's body and slowly wrapping her in it. No, no, I beg you. Inari Kami panicked and begged for mercy. Sei Ito ignored her and sped up the sealing technique. Soon, Inari Kami was sealed into a golden fox statue and was kept in the Rubik's Cube world by Sei Ito. Almost as soon as he put Rice Lotus God into the Rubik's Cube world, the entire God House suddenly shook. Pitch-black cracks appeared in the sky above the God House. It was like an irregular spider web, spreading across the entire God House. It looked like it was going to cover the entire God House. Sei Ito knew that this was because the shrine had lost its power. Without hesitation, he left the shrine and appeared in front of the shrine of Inari Taisha Shrine. Behind him was the Rice Lotus Divine Throne statue that was also covered in crack. Clearly, the entrance to the divine residence was this Rice Lotus Divine Throne statue, which was why it was affected when the divine residence collapsed, causing cracks to appear on its own. Next, it should be Tenzo. Unfortunately, she has been staying in Takamajiehara. I need to go to the upper realm to kill her. Sei Ito thought to himself as he walked out of the main shrine and looked up at the sun in the sky. Luckily, the earth is almost connected to the upper realm. I can go back and forth between the two realms. Otherwise, I will have to wait until I become a Gyudaluo to find her. After thinking about it, Sei Ito's figure flashed and arrived near Mount Fuji in Japan. That was because the path to Takamajiehara was in Mount Fuji. Sei Ito did not stop when he arrived at Mount Fuji. He walked slowly in the mountain and used his space ability to sense his surroundings to find the passage between the two realms. With Sei Ito's super strong senses, he soon found a golden passage that was hidden in the clouds that led to another world. Then, Sei Ito stepped forward and stepped on the golden cloud path that was like the sun shining through the dark clouds. He walked toward the spiritual world with floating reeds on the opposite side. Along the way, the space changed and Ito-sei gradually left the earth. Although this passage didn't seem to be long, and it seemed that it wouldn't take much time to finish it, even with the strength of Ito-sei's legs, it took him several hours to finish it. Then, Sei Ito felt his body become lighter and heavier. It was as if he had broken through some kind of obstacle and stepped on a solid path paved with yellow soil. The reeds that were half the height of a person on both sides swayed with the wind and made a soft rustling sound. The first thing Sei Ito felt when he came to the new world was that the air here was very clear. Although the Earth's air quality had improved a lot due to the surge of vitality recently, it was still too long ago. It was impossible to completely remove the industrial pollution that had been deposited for more than 100 years. Therefore, compared to this new world, there was still a long way to go. Secondly, the aura here was very abundant. It was even more abundant than the Earth that had just experienced the vitality tide. Seito could clearly feel the flow of vitality and the cleansing of his body with every breath he took. Finally, he felt that it was very quiet. After walking for almost half an hour, other than wild rabbits, pheasants, and a few other small animals, there was not even a living person. There was almost no bird chirping. If it wasn't for the fact that there was no death aura here, Seito would have thought that he was not in Takamagara, but in an abandoned country. Then, Seito gave up his original plan of asking someone where the Amaterasu residence was. He directly moved and flew into the sky. While flying forward, he used the heavenly vision and earthly hearing technique to search for the whereabouts of the person. Just like this, under Seito's all-out search, a village that was similar to the ancient Japanese residence appeared in front of his eyes. Chapter 2265. Itosei's figure flashed and appeared in front of the village. He walked into the village on foot. Perhaps it was because they had never seen an outsider before, or perhaps they had never seen an outsider dressed so differently from the mainstream. The children, farmers, and women who were playing leisurely and basking in the sun in the village all looked over curiously. Ignoring these gazes, Itosei walked forward and stopped in front of an old man. "Old man, do you know where Amaterasu Amikami lives?" Itosei asked the farmer who was panicking when he saw him coming. "No, I'm not sure," the farmer quickly replied. "Does anyone in the village know?" Seito asked. "The village chief might know," the farmer said. "Where is the village chief?" "Over there. The village chief lives in the biggest row house." Itosei looked in the direction of the farmer's finger, nodded and said, "Thank you." After saying that, he ignored the farmer and walked straight to the village head's house. In a minute or so, Itsunari walked to the village head's house, which was the most beautiful and occupied the largest area in the village. As he walked in through the open door, he said loudly, "Is anyone home?" "Who is it?" An old voice came from the house. Then, after about 10 seconds, a short old man with a rather imposing face walked out from the inner room, lifting the curtain. "You are." The village chief was confused when he saw Seito standing at the door. "Hello, village chief. I would like to know how to get to Amaterasu God's house." Seito smiled. "Amaterasu God's house? That's not a place where ordinary people like us can go." The village chief frowned. "Do you know how to get there?" Seito's eyes lit up as he asked. "That's a place where only the priests and shamans can go." "How would I know?" the village chief said angrily. "But I heard from a priest who came to our village to perform rituals that it's in the east. It's a place called Apollo City. As for the specifics, you'd better go to the town 20 miles north and ask the priestess." "I see. Okay, I understand. Thank you, village chief." Seito smiled and thanked him. After that, without waiting for the village head to speak, he turned around and walked out of the village head's terrace house, heading straight out of the village. "What a strange outsider," the village chief muttered as he watched Seito leave. On the other side, Itomori, who had left the village, did not hesitate. His figure flashed and appeared in the sky. Then, he turned into a streamer like a meteor. He shot toward the east. Although he didn't know the exact location of Apollo City, he believed that as long as he went to the east, he would find it. After all, as the residence of a god, its aura must be very powerful. With Seito's eyesight, as long as he wasn't too far away, he would definitely be able to see it. And the fact was indeed so. After Seito flew toward the east for about 10 minutes, a powerful aura that illuminated the void reflected in Seito's eyes. Then, not long after, a huge city appeared in Seito's line of sight. The city was built according to the ancient Japanese structure. It was divided into an inner city and an outer city. Between the cities were the residences of gods, priests, shamans, soldiers, and ordinary people. There were markets, taverns, brothels, dojos, and other places needed for life. It could be said that the whole city was no different from a normal city, except that there were a lot more gods than ordinary cities. The vast land outside the city was covered with grain field. A group of farmers in old clothes were working hard in the fields with old tools. As far as the situation was concerned, it seemed that the residents living in the world of gods weren't much better than the people in the mortal world. Except for living longer and not being harassed by monsters, their basic living standards might not be as good as the residents on Earth. At least the residents on Earth could still wear good clothes. With some good tools they couldn't. 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't expect that at this time, there would still be so many left in the city and didn't fall into the mortal world. Seito came to a stop near the huge Apollo city and looked at the aura of other gods in the aura above the city. Then, his figure flashed. He disappeared into the void. After waiting for more than an hour, when he reappeared, there was a large group of people around Seito: Mother Eriko, elder sister Suzu Ito, Masao, Yi, Kikikyo Kenna, Erika, Liliana, Karen, Valletta, Cornelia, Wei-Zi, Maijua, Charmy, Kaneyama Yomi, Kurinai, Uchiha Yoshiko, Toyo, Hellable, and Tuki Emi. Among them, Karen, Valletta, Cornelia, Erika, and Liliana each had a combat force of 1,000 people behind them. Hellable was followed by her 3 adjutants. As for the others, like Seito, they were alone. As soon as they appeared, a terrifying aura spread out outside Sun God City, startling all the gods in Sun God City. What's going on? Where did these gods come from? Is there going to be a war between gods? All kinds of divine thoughts filled with panic surged in the entire Apollo city. At this time, the majestic voice of the Apollo god Amaterasu sounded in the city, "Meet the enemy." Correspondingly, Seito also gave the order to attack. Attack! In an instant, the 5,000 special soldiers led by Cornelia, Valletta, Karen, Erika, and Liliana moved together, following Seito and the others like meteors toward the Apollo city. At the same time, the aura above the Apollo city condensed into a golden holy shield, covering the entire city. Many Einherjar soldiers climbed up the city wall, raised their spiritual bows, and attacked Seito's people. Retreat! Tuki Megumi, who had inherited the divine title of Hachiman and became the goddess of archery, shouted in a low voice as golden divine light flashed around her body. Then, the arrows that were shot at her changed direction in the air, as if they were blown by an invisible strong wind. They were reflected toward the soldiers on the city wall, and then were blocked by the golden energy light above the Apollo city. Seeing this, a divine light flashed in Tuki Megumi's eyes. She raised the big bow in her hand, imbued her divine power into it, and shot out a divine golden light, shooting out an arrow. Whoosh! The arrow pierced through the sky and instantly hit the shield of the Apollo city. Boom! Then, a huge explosion sounded. Under the powerful explosion, the entire shield trembled violently. However, even after it stabilized, it didn't break as expected. "Hui Na, try it," Hui Na of the Qingqiu courtyard said. With that, a light flashed in her hand, and she held a pitch-black long sword. She held the sword hilt with both hands and slashed forward with the most formal sword Dao upward slash. Then, an exaggeratedly huge crescent-shaped sword light appeared in the sky and directly hit the shield of the Apollo city. Boom! A dazzling light bloomed, and the whole shield trembled more violently than before, but the result was still the same. It still firmly covered the top of the city. Seito squinted at the energy shield and said, "Charmy, Uliana, Hui Na, you 3 attack together. Hui Na knows. Big sister knows. I can't wait." Hui Na, Uliana, and Charmy of the Qingqiu courtyard said one after another. Then, the 3 moved together. terrifying thunderclouds, sky full of icicles, and a huge crescent-shaped sword light all fell on the shield of the city. Boom! Boom! A terrifying explosion sounded, and the entire shield immediately shattered with a pop sound, turning into crystal fragments that filled the sky. The resulting energy shock wave rushed in all directions. As the commander of the army, Cornelia raised her sword and shouted, "Attack!" At the same time, the aura on her body bloomed like a halo, covering all 5,000 soldiers. This was the direct manifestation of her army prestige godhood. The 5,000-strong army growled out together, then marched towards the sun god city with heavy footsteps that quaked the earth. The Einherjar soldiers on the sun god city changed their expressions and hurriedly raised their arrows to defend themselves. However, they were immediately intercepted by the god of archery, Kitaki Emili, and shot back just like before. This time, without the protection of the energy shield, the Einherjar soldiers were immediately hit by the arrows and fell from the city wall. Seeing this, Sun God City knew that arrows were useless, so they could only switch to musketeers without the support of god power to counterattack. However, how could the musket ammunition without the support of divine power break through the defense of the individual combat suit, which was the crystallization of technology in the Rubik's Cube world? They were all blocked by the field deployed by the soldiers, and fell to the ground with clanking sounds. "Let's go," Seito said. The others nodded and turned into light with Seito, rushing into Sun God City without the protection of the shield. "I'll deal with Amaterasu. You guys deal with the others. Be careful." Seito turned his head and said to the people around him as he flew into the city. "You too," Big Sister Suzuito said. Seito looked at everyone again. After getting their response, he jumped out of the team and flew toward Tensho Pavilion, which was at the top of Hanmaru, at the center of Sun God City. That was because the aura of Amaterasu was the most obvious and clear there. "Be careful," Suzuito turned her head and said to the women around her. Following which, everyone spread out and sought out the various deities in the city, beginning their first battle after becoming deities. As for the Einherjar army in the city, they were restrained by the 5,000 soldiers led by Cornelia and the other 4. They couldn't assist the gods in the city. Chapter 2266. P.S. Thank you to Leonard for your precious monthly vote. P.S. My new book didn't pass the first review. I need to revise it tonight. Start preparing for the second review, Walala. Wood chips flew, and Ito-sei's figure appeared in Tiensho Pavilion. In Tiensho Pavilion, aside from the target he was looking for, Amaterasu Amikami, there was a man and a woman standing next to her. They were each holding a long sword and a bronze mirror. They were looking at Ito-sei, who had just broken into the pavilion, with caution. "Long time no see, Amaterasu." Seito glanced at the two of them, and then looked at Amaterasu Amikami, who was sitting in the middle, and smiled. "I didn't expect you to be so bold. Do you really want to start a war between the 10,000 gods?" Amaterasu narrowed her eyes and stared at Seito coldly. 10,000 gods? Are you sure you can summon 10,000 true gods? Seito sneered. Although Shinto in Japan claimed that there were 8 million gods, that number included the nature spirit. It didn't mean that there were 8 million true gods. Most of the true gods were like fairies and fairies in Western mythology. They didn't have the strength or the ability to fight. Their actual combat power was even weaker than the heroic spirit generals in the city. There weren't many true gods that could be used. There were only about 100 of them, and they were divided into 3 groups: Tianjin gods, Guijin gods, and Hades gods. Therefore, the number of true gods that Amaterasu could summon was even less. There were only about 30 of them, which was about the same as Seito's current strength. Of course, if the Guijin gods were willing to put aside their prejudice against Tianjin gods and come to his rescue, that would be a different story. Amaterasu, who was just bluffing to scare Seito, was stunned. His expression became unsightly. Seito ignored Amaterasu and looked at the man and woman standing in front of Amaterasu and asked, "Who are you two?" "I am Yamada Tsumi." He had a firm expression and looked like an old man in the mountains. The middle-aged man with a glowing saber in his hand replied loudly. "It's the blooming of flowers," said the woman holding the bronze mirror. After hearing their reports, Seito's eyes flashed as he recalled their information. "See you on the mountain." He was the oldest mountain god in Japanese legends, the god of wine and the god of war. He was the third son of Itsune and Itsu. In terms of kinship, he could be said to be the elder brother of Amaterasu Amikami. However, it was recorded in books such as the Kojiki that he was an ancient god of other people. He was one of the strongest rebels against Tenchu's domination of the heavens. He was one of the ancient gods of Tianjin after being subjugated by the god of thunder, Buddha-Hun. Kanahana Kasuya was the second daughter of the great mountain Jin Shun. She was the cherry blossom goddess and was responsible for the blooming and withering of cherry blossoms. Other than that, she was also the wife of the son of Amaterasu, Lord Kyeonkyong. She had given birth to a celestial grandson, the god of fire. She was also the mother of the Japanese god that Seito killed first. They are all famous people. Ito Mori sighed softly, and then his eyes fell on Kanahana Kaya. While looking at her face and figure with interest, he chuckled and said, "Sure enough, as the legend says, you are very beautiful. No wonder Lord Kyeonkyong attacked you in the middle of the night." "You?" Kanahana Kasuya's face turned red when her secret was exposed. She glared at Seito angrily. Boom! Just then, a violent explosion came from outside the Tensho Pavilion. "It seems like there is a fight outside. Let's not waste any more time. Let's begin." Seito looked at Amaterasu and said. Amaterasu's expression changed when she heard that. She gritted her teeth and said, "Roar!" She shouted, "Go!" Just as she said that, a dazzling golden light shot out from the mirror in Kanahana Kasuya's hand. A powerful tearing force enveloped Seito's body. Suddenly, Seito felt pain all over his body. The clothes on his body instantly turned to dust and disappeared in the golden light. Then, thin and long wounds appeared on his body, and traces of golden blood seeped out. Seito, who was in the light, frowned. He immediately clenched his fist and punched the golden light in front of him. This punch looked ordinary, like an attack that a beginner could do. However, after the punch was thrown, the entire golden light space shook. Slender cracks appeared all over the space. Then, with a boom sound, it exploded. A powerful shockwave spread out in all directions, but in the next second, a dazzling sword slashed out from the shockwave. With a dazzling light, it cut towards Seito's neck. Itose stomped his feet and leaped back, dodging the attack of the blade by a hair's breadth. Shio! However, before Seito could land on the ground, more than 10 golden lights appeared around him. They wrapped around his limbs, waist, and neck like snake. Then, the light rope ignited with golden sun flames, burning Seito. Although the flames didn't look big, as if they could be put out by a basin of water, the temperature was surprisingly high. It was more than 100,000 degrees. Therefore, as soon as it appeared, Seito's skin couldn't help but emit a light sizzling sound, and white smoke came out of it. It made Seito groan. Humph! Then, the dazzling sword slashed towards Seito's throat again. What a tight attack, Seito, who was entangled by the sun-fire rope, sighed. With a thought, he immediately activated the sun god power belonging to Mitra, so that the sun-fire rope's influence on him would be minimized. Then, he raised his head and kicked Satomi Oyama's abdomen while dodging the beheading sword. Bang! Under the huge explosion of power, Satomi Oyama instantly turned into a cannonball, flew out, broke through the wooden wall of Tiensho Pavilion, and disappeared into the distance. Then, Seito forcibly broke the sun-fire rope with his hand. Then, with a tap of his foot, he flew in front of Kanahana-sei, who was holding a bronze mirror connected to the fire rope. The heavenly sword appeared in his hand, and instantly swept across Kanahana-sei's neck. Whoosh! Kanahana-sei's body suddenly scattered. It turned into pink cherry blossoms that filled the sky and fluttered to the side. Knowing that this was probably Kanahana-sei's way of escaping, Seito didn't hesitate. With a shake of his arm, a red lightning was flung out by his sword, hitting the cherry blossoms that filled the room. Boom! The lightning exploded, turning into fine electric sparks that filled the sky, spreading towards all the cherry blossoms. But in the next second, with a crackling sound, the scattered innate fire divine lightning suddenly condensed again, and then like a swallow returning to its nest, it shot back towards Seito. Seeing this, Seito's expression changed slightly, and pointed his sword at the divine lightning that flew back. Boom! With a loud bang, a dazzling light appeared in Tiansho Pavilion. At this moment, a fiery golden light shot out from the side, like a speeding arrow, and flew towards Seito's head. Seito, who was constantly paying attention to his surroundings with his six senses, wasn't surprised. His upper body leaned back slightly and dodged the attack. But then, even more golden light rays shot towards Seito like rain. Seito's mind turned instinctively. He used teleportation, but who would have thought that it didn't work, and he was still in the same place, about to be hit by the golden light rain. In this, Seito didn't panic, and without seeing him do anything, a large amount of lightning shot out from his body. It collided with the golden light rain. Boom! A white cloud of energy appeared, and once again enveloped Seito. But this time, Seito immediately used his long sword to cut through the cloud of energy. Then, his gaze locked onto Amaterasu, who was creating a solar fireball not far away, and shot towards her. Humph! At the same time, Amaterasu snorted coldly, and the crispy jade pendant hanging around her neck suddenly lit up, releasing a green light that instantly enveloped the entire room. Immediately, Seito felt the air around him stop moving, and time in Tiansho Pavilion stop. Then, Amaterasu sent the solar fireball that she had already created flying towards Seito. Time stopped, huh? Seito laughed in his heart. With a thought, he used the time rule power he had mastered to break the time imprisonment formed by the Amaterasu Magatama. Then, he swung the sword in his hand forward. With a poof sound, the solar fireball that flew in front of him was split into two, turning into two smooth hemispheres that flew past him on his left and right. Then, Seito's body moved, and as if he had teleported, he appeared in front of Amaterasu, whose expression had changed slightly. The heavenly sword in his hand shone brightly, and flew out of his palm, drawing a beautiful arc in the air before appearing behind Amaterasu, and piercing through her back. Poof! Golden blood and the protruding tip of the sword instantly appeared from Amaterasu's chest. Then, the light of the Magatama dissipated, and time returned to normal. Reiki? Kanahana Sayaki's voice rang out. Let go of Reiki. Then, Kanahana Sayaki grabbed a wooden hairpin from her head, and with her strange divine power, it turned into a long sword with a metallic luster. As Kanahana Sayaki charged forward, she slashed at Seito's arm that was holding Amaterasu's neck. Seito, who was under Kanahana Sayaki's attack, did not dodge. Instead, he waved his hand, and a strong wind slammed into Kanahana Sayaki's body like a speeding truck, causing her to fly faster than she came. She only stopped when she hit the wall of Tiansho Pavilion. Taking advantage of Kanahana Kasuya's attack on Itosei, Amaterasu's body, which was captured by Itosei, burned fiercely, turning into a pure flame state. In an instant, it escaped from Itosei's hands, like a stream of light. It flew out from the place where Takomi Yamamoto had hit, and almost disappeared in the sky in the blink of an eye. See? This is the Reiki that you risked your life to save, Seito turned around and looked at Kanahana Sayaki, who was almost unharmed, and sneered. After that, he turned into a bolt of lightning and chased after Amaterasu. Boom! Amaterasu's body flashed, and he turned into a bolt of lightning. Stop! Kanahana Sayaki's expression changed as she shouted. Then, her body scattered, and she disappeared from Tiensho Pavilion in a breeze. Just like that, with one retreating and one escaping, the three of them quickly flew thousands of kilometers away. They were about to fly out of Takamajiehara's border and enter the vast universe. At this time, Kanahana Sayaki, who was the weakest, could not hold on any longer. Her speed slowly decreased, and she was soon left behind by Seito and Amaterasu. However, Kanahana Sayaki was not discouraged. She threw the bronze mirror in her hand, and it floated in front of her. She used the mirror to reflect Amaterasu's image as she chased closely behind. Itase and Amaterasu did not care about Kanahana Sayaki behind them. They quickly rushed out of Takamajiehara and flew into the starry sky. They flew deep into the starry sky. But at this time, Seito suddenly noticed that the universe was very familiar. This was because this was none other than the solar system that Seito had been to several times. At this time, Seito and Amaterasu were in the area between the Earth and the Moon. However, it was different from the empty space between the Earth and the Moon that Seito knew. At this time, there were a lot of large and small boulders that looked like floating islands or floating meteorite. This surprised Seito. Looks like this place is the same as Takamajiehara. It is in another space that is connected to the Earth, but there are some differences in dimensions. Seito thought to himself. After flying for a while, Seito saw a gray boulder that was about 10 meters tall and 5 to 6 meters wide. It was oval-shaped, and there were all kinds of strange blood-red runes on its surface. In the middle of the boulder, there was a thick knot full of coins. Then, Amaterasu moved and slammed into the boulder like an arrow. In an instant, the surface of the boulder lit up slightly. All the blood-red runes started to roll quickly like fish swimming to the thick knot in the middle of the boulder. With a whoosh, they burst into flames and turned into a pile of ashes that drifted away from the boulder. Then, the boulder began to tremble, as if a creature that had been sealed for a long time was trying to break free from it. Amaterasu! Then, a loud roar filled with anger rang out in the void. The boulder seemed to have been hit by a huge force and suddenly shattered into pieces, revealing a naked man with red skin and a big bald head. The man who had regained his freedom roared at the sky. An extremely violent and terrifying aura burst out from his body. Seito, who sensed the terrifying aura, stopped in his tracks and looked at the man with a frown. But before he could do anything, Amaterasu's voice rang out in the void. As long as you help me kill him, I will fulfill your wish. Chapter 2267. These words could be said to be extremely ambiguous. It didn't indicate who he was talking to at all, so the meaning of it in everyone's ears was completely different. For example, right now, when Seito and the newcomer heard it, Seito and the bald man instinctively thought that he was talking to each other. Therefore, they couldn't help but feel wary and hostile towards him. But soon, Seito came back to his senses. He felt that something was wrong. But it was already too late. The bald man opened his mouth and spat out a powerful energy beam towards him. Sensing the terrifying power contained in the beam, Seito didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately dodged to the side. The beam that missed its target immediately bombarded a huge meteorite that happened to be drifting by not far away, disintegrating it into nothingness silently. Seeing that his attack missed, the bald man didn't delay at all. He leaped up and arrived in front of Seito. He clenched his fists and blasted them towards Seito, bringing with them mysterious and cold black energy clouds. Seito raised his arm to block the bald man's attack. Bang! But in the next second, Ito felt his skin tighten. A large amount of life force was devoured by the black energy clouds surging from the bald man's fists, causing his skin to dry up rapidly. It was like the skin of an old person, showing a withered white color. Undead ability? Ito's expression changed when he saw this. He immediately lifted his foot and kicked the bald man away. He flew back and circulated the energy in his body to force the remaining undead energy out of his body. It allowed his withered arms to return to normal. The bald man who was kicked away stretched his arms forward. A large number of undead flew out from between his arms. In the blink of an eye, the undead expanded to a diameter of tens of meters, forming a terrifying tide of undead. Ito's screams, which made him want to scratch his head, rushed towards Ito. Ito waved his arm and unleashed purple-blue flames that filled the sky, forming a tall wall in front of the undead tide. In the blink of an eye, the two collided. Who? Immediately after, flames rose and ignited the entire undead tide. Who are you? Ito asked loudly. However, the one who answered him was not the bald man. It was Tenzho, who was still hiding somewhere. He is the heavenly fragrance back man, the most powerful and evil god among the Tianjin gods. As long as you can defeat him, I will fulfill your wish. No matter how stupid Ito was, he knew what the Tenzho was trying to do. Her plan was very simple. She wanted to kill someone with a borrowed knife. She wanted to use the strongest evil god in Japanese mythology to kill her. The heavenly fragrance back man was the legendary Tianjin god, the god of Venus, and the lord of the stars in Japanese mythology. The ruler of countless stars was many times more powerful than Taibai Jinxing, who was of the same origin as him in Chinese myths and legends, but who did the work of running back and forth. He had great power and mastered a lot of terrifying undead and soul-related secret techniques. According to the legends, many brutal gods on Earth were killed by him. However, he was very ambitious. He always wanted to replace the Tenzho, which eventually led to a rebellion. He became the target of the gods of Takama Jiehara. However, he was too powerful. Even when the strongest of the Tianjin gods, Kenyu Raikami and Jingjin Master God, joined forces, they were unable to defeat him. In the end, they had to rely on the Japanese god Jian Yichui's incessant persuasion from the side to prevent the heavenly fragrance back Prince Charming from erupting with his full strength. The two gods, Jian Yu Lei Shun and Jingjin Master God, seized the opportunity to defeat him and seal him. It was the strange big rock that Ito saw before. It was not that the Tenzho spared his life because they were both Tianjin gods. It was because his power was too strong. He had reached the level where his soul could not be destroyed. It was impossible to kill him. Therefore, she had no choice but to seal him away and leave him as a hidden danger. However, she did not expect that he would be used as a life-saving straw and a killing knife in her hand. Tenzho, you stinking woman! Come out and fight me if you dare. I will tear you apart. The heavenly fragrance back man roared. Heavenly fragrance back man, if you want to see me, you have to defeat the person in front of you. He is a warrior that I have handpicked. He will definitely be able to kill you and send you to hell. Tenzho said loudly. What a joke. He wants to kill me? The heavenly fragrance back man laughed as if he had heard a funny joke. His voice was full of mockery. Heavenly fragrance back man, don't believe the Tenchu's nonsense. I am just like you. We are both enemies. She said that because she wants to use your power to kill me. Let's stop fighting and kill the Tenzho first. Ito said loudly. The heavenly fragrance back man, who was about to attack, paused. A thoughtful expression appeared on his face. However, the Tenchu's voice sounded again in the void. Ito, you don't need to use such words to deceive him. With your strength, you can defeat him in a head-on battle. Why do you need to use tricks like a mortal? Your actions will make you despise Kenyu Raikami and Jingjin Master God. don't you want to fulfill your wish? In an instant, the heavenly fragrance Backman's expression changed. He stared at Sei-Ito with a fiercer gaze. The Tenchu's words reminded him of the time when he was fighting Kenyu Raikami and Jingjin Master God. He had been lied to by the Japanese god Kenyu Raikami. I don't care if you are an enemy or not. I don't care if the Tensho is telling the truth. As long as I kill you, nothing will be a problem, the heavenly fragrance Backman said fiercely. Then, he opened his mouth and howled. An ear-piercing scream spread out from the heavenly fragrance Backman's body along with a visible shockwave. In the blink of an eye, it swept across dozens of kilometers of the void. Suddenly, Sei-Ito, who was in the middle of the shockwave, paused. A strong sense of dizziness and pain appeared in his mind. Then, the man with the heavenly fragrance stretched out his hand and pointed forward, shooting a black stream of light at Ito-sei. Sei-Ito instinctively sensed a strong sense of danger. His heart tightened. He didn't dare to hesitate. His body moved, and he turned into a bolt of lightning and fled. Seeing that his attack had missed, the heavenly fragrance Backman didn't hesitate either. He immediately turned into a stream of light and chased after Sei-Ito. Almost immediately after Sei-Ito reappeared, the heavenly fragrance Backman appeared in front of Sei-Ito. Black energy surged around his body like a black wave that suddenly appeared. At this time, Sei-Ito, who had barely recovered from the soul attack of the witch's howl, surged with energy. Golden sun flames burned around his body. Then, like a meteor, he slammed into the heavenly fragrance Backman's chest. At the same time, he stretched out his arms and grabbed them. The golden flames surged and instantly surged onto the heavenly fragrance Backman's body. Immediately, the heavenly fragrance Backman let out a miserable howl. Then, the surrounding pitch-black energy quickly surged, forming a pitch-black storm filled with cold energy. It revolved around the heavenly fragrance Backman and Sei-Ito at high speed. In an instant, the sun flames burning around Sei-Ito's body were greatly suppressed. In this regard, Ito-sei didn't care at all. He opened his mouth, and a silver-white bright light suddenly flew out from his mouth. It instantly pierced into the forehead of the heavenly fragrance Backman who was close to him, and went through the back of his head. PFFF. However, to Sei-Ito's surprise, the heavenly fragrance Backman didn't seem to feel anything at all. He smiled maliciously at Sei-Ito and spat out the same beam of light that he had used when they first met. Ito-sei's expression changed slightly. He tilted his head and dodged the attack by a hair's breadth. Even so, a crescent-shaped gap appeared on one side of his ear under the piercing of the golden light. Ito-sei endured the pain and frowned. With a thought, 2 arms emerged from his chest out of thin air. He clenched his hands into fists and punched the hot masculine energy into the chest of the heavenly fragrant Backman, one punch after another. Bang! 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 This time, the heavenly fragrance Backman's expression finally changed. However, soon after, his body dispersed and turned into a pitch-black cloud of smoke. He instantly surged towards Sei-Ito's head and burrowed into his body through his exposed eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. He looked just like a great demon in a movie when he possessed a person. "You're looking to die." At the same time, Sei-Ito's soul in his sea of consciousness shone brightly. He glared at the heavenly fragrance Backman who gradually appeared in the divine court and roared out coldly. Afterwards, he extended a finger and countless streaks of golden light appeared in the divine court. They were like a black hole that sucked in all light as they shot towards the heavenly fragrance Backman from all directions. Ah! The heavenly fragrance Backman, who was completely unprepared, immediately let out a painful scream. Speaking of which, why did he have to use the possession technique to take over Sei-Ito's body? This strange guy was neither a god nor an immortal. If it was an ordinary god, regardless of whether they were from the Japanese divine system or not. As long as their strength was inferior to his, they would naturally be devoured. Even if their strength was on the same level, but their mastery of power and laws was inferior to his necromancy secret technique, it would be the same. However, the heavenly fragrance back man had chosen Seito. Putting aside the fact that the strength of his soul was far greater than that of an ordinary god's soul, the various strange powers that Seito possessed were enough to make the heavenly fragrance back man suffer. Moreover, there were many powers that could restrain him. Wasn't this seeking his own death? Therefore, it didn't take long for half of the heavenly fragrance back man's soul to be handed over to Seito in his sea of consciousness. It was sealed by Seito's soul. Chapter 2268. The next moment, the black smoke that had been rushing towards Seito's head shook. It seemed as if something was pushing it away. It left Seito's body at an even faster speed than when it had entered his body. Then, it hurriedly fled into the distance. "I'll remember you. Next time, I'll skin you and pull out your tendons. Then, I'll devour your soul." The heavenly fragrance man's heart was filled with unwillingness as he fled. Then, he issued a threat from afar. "Where do you think you're going?" "Stay here," Seito coldly shouted as his eyes shone brightly. Then, he stretched out his hand and grabbed in front of him. The heavenly fragrance man immediately felt the space around him tighten. It seemed as if he had been restrained by some kind of power. Then, the space around him changed. The heavenly fragrance man appeared in front of Seito once again. "Since you want to kill me, then you'll go to hell with me," the heavenly fragrance man roared. He had lost nearly half of his spiritual energy. So, his aura had clearly become much weaker. Then, the black clouds around his body started to roll. His body started to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he had broken free from the shackles that Seito had placed on his body. Then, he turned into a tall giant that was comparable to a star. Then, the heavenly fragrance man's hands moved forward. They enveloped Seito. A powerful force surged and squeezed the surrounding space. This made it so that Seito couldn't use his teleportation-like ability to escape from the heavenly fragrance man's grasp. If it was before, when the strength of the heavenly fragrant back man was still intact, maybe this blow might be able to catch Itose, but now that he had lost more than half of his strength, even if he broke out with all his strength, he was still far from being able to catch up to Seito. Therefore, Itose, who was in the palm of the man with the heavenly fragrance's back, suddenly disappeared into the space squeezed out by the man's palms. The next moment, the golden light flashed again and Seito appeared above the heavenly fragrance man's head. He flipped his palm and threw out a large jade-colored seal. This seal was none other than a treasure that had gathered the will and fate of several worlds, the Imperial Jade Seal and Jade Annulus. The Jade Annulus of He Clan that flew out from Seito's hand expanded in the air. Almost in an instant, it expanded from its original height of about 10 centimeters to a huge jade seal the size of Mount Tai. Its surface was flickering with light. With an absolute power that could suppress everything, it smashed down on the head of the man with the heavenly fragrance's back. Bang! Ripples appeared in the void, and the man with the heavenly fragrance's back staggered forward. However, the attack of the Jade Annulus of He Clan was still not over. In the next moment, the Jade Annulus of He Clan flashed with light once more, and 9 illusory dragons of different shapes flew out from the coiling dragon carvings at the top of the Jade Annulus of He Clan. They roared as they coiled around the man with the heavenly fragrance's back, turning into giant pythons that tightly coiled around the man's body. It made him look like a coiling dragon pillar that had been enlarged thousands of times. "Withdraw." Seito pointed at the Jade Annulus of He Clan on the man's head and calmly shouted. Then, a boundless and powerful suction force erupted from the Jade Annulus of He Clan with the assistance of the 9 dragons coiling around the man's body. The man with the heavenly fragrances back was sucked into the jade annulus of He Clan. No! Under the suction force of the jade annulus of He Clan, the man with the heavenly fragrances back became smaller and smaller as he unwillingly shouted, "Amaterasu! Ito! I definitely won't let you off. Definitely!" A moment later, the jade annulus of He Clan lit up. It quickly shrank back to its original size and flew back into Ito's hand. A faint light flickered on its surface, and it looked especially beautiful. One couldn't feel the power that it had released before at all. Then, Ito flipped his hand and put away the jade annulus of He Clan that sealed the man with the heavenly fragrances back. He turned his head and looked at Amaterasu, who was hiding in the void not far away, as well as Konohana Saeki, who had rushed over when Ito and the man with the heavenly fragrances back were fighting. "Amaterasu, what other tricks do you have?" Ito walked through the void towards Amaterasu as he calmly said. Amaterasu's expression changed slightly, and his face became gloomy, but he didn't say a word. "Looking at your expression, is that it?" Ito said softly. There were naturally people in the Japanese pantheon who could deal with Ito, but whether it was her brother Susanoo, Tsukuyomi, or Itsunami, who had hidden in the depths of the Yellow Spring, none of them were people she could easily invite. Because of the past, she didn't even want to invite them. But other than them, Amaterasu couldn't think of anyone else in the Tianjin pantheon who could be a match for the enemy in front of her. As for the legendary 5 great gods who lived in seclusion in the outer sky of Takamagara, well, Amaterasu had never even seen them. It was even more of a joke to expect them to save her. Then surrender, Ito said and reached out to grab Amaterasu. "Don't even think about it," Konohana Saeki shouted. Then, she jumped in front of Amaterasu and pointed the bronze mirror in her hand at Ito. In an instant, a powerful suction force was transmitted from the mirror, sucking Ito's body and pulling him into the mirror. At the same time, Amaterasu's eyes lit up, and she waved her hand to summon a sky full of sunflowers. She shot them at Ito like rain, interfering with his resistance to the suction force of the mirror. However, Ito-sei, who was facing a sky full of attacks, smirked slightly. He suddenly let go of his resistance to the suction of the mirror. His body immediately flew along with the suction of the mirror. It was very easy for him to get out of the sky full of sunflower sparks. He almost instantly flew to the front of the mirror. But then, Ito's body stopped again. Before Konohana Saeki's smile could fully bloom, he turned around and appeared beside her. He used his fingers as a knife and swung his arm to cut Konohana Saeki's wrist. Bang! Konohana Saeki was in pain, and she subconsciously let go of the bronze mirror in her hand. Ito reached out and caught the bronze mirror in his hand, and with a clasp, he sent it into the Rubik's Cube world. Then, Ito's hand that cut Konohana Saeki's wrist was cut diagonally, and it instantly hit Konohana Saeki's throat. Bang! Ugh! The power of the palm blade immediately made Konohana Saeki's breathing stagnate. She covered her throat with both hands and knelt in the void with a painful expression on her face. Ito did not let her off, and then he slapped Konohana Saeki's head with a backhand. Bang! In an instant, Konohana Saeki felt a pain in her head, and her entire consciousness became blurry. Then, the scenery in front of her changed in an instant, from a dark universe to a world with flowers and trees, but before she could see where she was, she suddenly fainted. To the outside world, Konohana Saeki instantly disappeared into the universe. Of course, all of this seemed to take a long time, but under Ito's rapid attack, all of the exchanges were completed in an extremely compressed second. So, before Tensho could react, his guard Konohana Saeki had already disappeared into thin air. Then, Ito's left hand swept in front of Tensho, creating a dazzling white light. Unnumbered Complex Keto by Fu. Suddenly, Tensho felt dizzy, and a feeling of extreme drowsiness rose from the bottom of his heart. Tenzho knew that he had been hit, and his heart tightened. Without thinking, he turned himself back into a golden sun flame, using the power of authority to erupt the highest temperature he could muster, and burned Sei Ito in front of him. Whoosh! The blazing heat surged, and Sei Ito's hair suddenly became charred under the heat of the fire. Then, he jumped back and jumped away from Tenzho. However, it was not Sei Ito's style to just stand there and watch. With a thought, a large amount of liquid appeared out of thin air from the universe, where there should be no liquid at all. They fused together and turned into a blue ocean that stretched for nearly 100 kilometers. Under Sei Ito's control, it wrapped around Tenzho, who had turned into a solar fireball like a cloth. Whoosh! Steam rose, and a large amount of water vapor appeared in the universe. However, the void ocean created by Sei Ito was too big, and with Sei Ito's energy supply, it had a very strong ability to sustain itself. Therefore, no matter how hard Tenzho tried to burn, the sea water did not decrease at all, and it steadily wrapped around her. Then, Sei Ito's thoughts moved again, and a large amount of frost suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea water out of thin air. With a kacha-kacha sound, the frost spread rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, the outermost part of the sea water ball was frozen into ice, and it continued to freeze the inner part of the ball. Under the continuous attack, most of the sea water was frozen into a ball of ice, and only the outermost part of the solar fireball that Tenzho had turned into remained in a liquid state, and it was filled with a large amount of steam. If he did not solve this quickly, it would not take long for the entire ice ball to explode due to the high internal pressure. However, at this time, Tenzho, who was completely encased in the ice ball, had reached a level where she could be sent into the Rubik's Cube world. Therefore, Sei Ito did not hesitate and immediately sent the ice ball into the Rubik's Cube world. Then, the power of the Rubik's Cube world began to operate, and all kinds of powerful energy that even gods could not resist erupted from the void, turning into thick energy chains that penetrated the ice and pierced into Tenchu's body. She was suspended in the void of the Rubik's Cube world like a prisoner, and she was sealed. After that, Sei Ito did not stay in the universe after dealing with Tenzho. He quickly flew back to Takamagara. Chapter 2269. P.S. Thank you to Sacred Knight for your precious monthly vote. P.S. What kind of sci-fi anime and movies do you have? It would be best if there is a portable high-energy battery inside, such as the Terminator's small hydrogen battery. Thank you. Takamagahara, in the Sun God City, the fierce battle was basically over. Only a few sounds of metal clashing could be heard occasionally from the city. Obviously, someone was doing the final cleaning work. In the middle of the Sun God City, two burly warriors in black armor were surrounded by a group of women. There was a lot of blood and wounds on their bodies, and they looked a little embarrassed. They were the strongest warriors in the entire Takamagahara, Imperial Thunder God and Jingu Lord God. As one of the two gods with high-level divine power, he was the only one who hadn't been defeated yet, Tianjin God. Hina, are you okay? Yi whispered to Sakuya Courtyard's Hina, who was covered in blood and whose breath was fluctuating. I'm fine, but it seems that I can't participate in the battle anymore. Sakuya Courtyard's Hina said with some frustration. Let all the people who use swords step down. Eriko Ito said. Yes, since the power of swords and swords can't affect them, let all the people who use swords step down. Suzu Ito echoed. Hearing this, the others looked at each other and retreated from the front, leaving the front position to Karen, Valletta, Hellable, Mayo, Wei-Zi, Maijua, Charmy, Kurinai, Uchiha Yoshiko, and others who didn't use swords. At the same time, Eriko Ito, Suzu Ito, and Kanzen Yomi put away their weapons and stayed in the second circle, which was relatively behind. The third circle was where Yi, Erika, Liliana, and Sakuya Courtyard's Hina, who were pure swordsman warriors, and Suki Mayuri and Oriana, who had long-range attack power, were standing. Humph. A group of bitches and fake gods, do you think you can defeat us like this? Seeing Eriko and the others change their formation, Imperial Thunder God sneered. Imperial Thunder God sneered with disdain. Boo-doo, remember to be merciful later. These sluts are pretty good-looking. I want to enjoy their bodies after the battle. As a conqueror, it must feel great. The red-faced Lord God Jingjin said loudly with a strange smile. As soon as he said that, Karen, Valletta, and the others were enraged. As for the others, every single one of them were people that had experienced battles for a long time, and they possessed thick and dark thoughts. They wouldn't reveal their emotions because of this bit of foul language, and they completely maintained their composure. Even Jianshan Yellow Spring, Erica, and Charmy had strange, dangerous smiles on their faces. You'd better do it yourself. I'm not interested. Imperial Thunder God's eyes flashed, and he said in a deep voice, You're lying again. Back then when we were attacking Withered China, I don't know which guy was the one who slept with all the girls along the way. Jingjin laughed. Humph. Hearing Master God Jingjin's words, the corner of Thunder God Jinyu's mouth curled up slightly and he let out a soft sound of fake dissatisfaction. Are you done with your nonsense? Wei Zi, whose upper body was leaning forward, exuded a violent aura like a wild beast that was choosing its prey. She said coldly, If you're done, then die. After saying that, Wei Zi's body dashed and appeared in front of Thunder God Jian. Her arm turned into a black whip and lashed at Thunder God Jian. At the same time, Mai Zhuo, who saw Wei Zi's action, did not hesitate and rushed to the front of Master God Jingjin. He raised his leg and kicked, sweeping out dazzling energy saber light. Karen and Valletta reacted and appeared beside Thunder God Jian and Master God Jingjin with their body blink technique. They then unleashed their extraordinary strength fists that were filled with divine power. They blasted toward the two gods with a strong wind. Thunder God Jian and Master God Jingjin's expression changed, and they both dodged the attacks from the four gods. However, before they could counterattack, a cloud of flying flowers and a faint flute sound suddenly appeared. It messed up their vision and interfered with their consciousness, causing their consciousness to become sluggish. Then, Thunder God Jian felt his arm heat up, and a black flame suddenly burned on his sword-wielding arm. Awakened by the great pain, the Imperial Thunder God's body flashed with white light, and the black fire of Amaterasu was shaken away from his arm. He waved his sword to create a dense golden sword net, forcing the black fire and flying flowers away from his side. However, right after that, a dazzling lightning fell from the sky with a force that could destroy mountains and seas, and directly bombarded Thunder God Jian, who was protected by the saber light. Kaboom! Lightning flashed, and dense lightning spread out from the saber light circle, causing Thunder God Jian, who was wielding a sword, to pause for a moment. Seizing this opportunity, Jianshan Yellow Spring immediately pointed his finger at Imperial Thunder God. 6 flat dark yellow light marks exuding darkness attribute appeared around Imperial Thunder God and pierced into his waist. Then, a weak incantation sounded from Jianshan Yellow Spring's mouth. Thunder God's carriage spinning wheel, there is light in the cracks of this item, one divided into 6. After that, Mayo flashed and appeared above Thunder God Jian, who was immobilized by the 6 lights. He clenched his fists like hammers and fiercely smashed Thunder God Jian's helmet. Bang! Golden light flashed, and visible ripples spread out from where the fist and helmet made contact. Thunder God Jian felt his head shake, and his vision became a bit blurry. At this time, Eriko Ito's hands formed the motionless seal, and released the motionless flame at Thunder God Jian. With the support of Ito Eriko's sun god power, the originally red Akala flame instantly turned golden. It swept up a fierce vortex and surged towards Kenji Raikami, who was stunned and then stunned. Boom! The flame exploded and instantly enveloped Thunder God Jian. On the other side, Jingjin Lord, who had just dodged Mai Jue and Valletta's pincer attack, stood still. A sharp spike shot out from the ground under his feet, and directly pierced towards his lower body. Jingjin Lord's expression changed as he felt a chill in his lower body. He quickly bit his tongue, and used the pain to separate himself from the outside world. He kicked off the spike, and his body flew into the air at high speed. However, at this time, Helibal's figure suddenly appeared in front of him, and he slashed with his soul-splitting blade. A blade of light with divine power slashed towards Jingjin Lord. Jingjin Lord's blade flashed with golden light, and he swung it. Helibal's blade of light was instantly cut in half, and then the blade of light continued to fly towards Helibal without slowing down. Helibal activated Ring Spin, and in a flash, he reappeared diagonally above Jingjin Overgod. He slashed with the strange Zanpakuto in his hand, and a large amount of water appeared out of nowhere, crashing toward Jingjin Overgod like a waterfall. Jingjin Lord took a step in the air and dodged the waterfall. Bang! Whoosh! The waterfall missed, and it crashed onto the ground. A large amount of water splashed out. However, the splashing water paused, and as if it was affected by some kind of power, it turned into water arrows, and shot towards Jingjin Lord, who was in the air, against gravity. Master God Jingjin swung his saber in a circle. A huge half-moon blade appeared in front of him, shattering all the incoming arrows into nothingness. However, in the next moment, an arrow flashing with golden light appeared out of nowhere behind him, and it hit his armor hard. Boom! The arrow exploded, and Jingjin Lord was sent flying. At this moment, Uriana uttered a short incantation, and dozens of pitch-black gravity balls appeared around Jingjin. As if they were attracted by something, they rapidly collided with Jingjin, who was flying a short distance away. Boom! There was a loud explosion. Jingjin Lord was instantly engulfed by the smoke that erupted. Then, Jingjin Lord flew out of the smoke, and he landed heavily on the ground, leaving a trail of smoke behind him. Bang! Suzu Ito quickly pointed at Jingjin Lord, who had fallen to the ground. 5 or 6 long, thin metal staffs, flickering with spiritual light, appeared out of nowhere in front of the Jingjin sovereign, shooting down at high speed. Jingjin Lord's 4 limbs, head and waist were nailed to the ground. Bakudo number 62, 100 steps railing. Then Mai Jue, Valletta, and Helibal moved together, and appeared beside Jingjin Lord. They used their fists, feet, and Zanpakuto to block Jingjin Lord's head. You've been captured. Valletta looked at Jingjin Lord, who was nailed to the ground by the 100 steps railing, and said softly, "Ha! Do you think that a mere spell of this level can seal me? What a joke!" Jingjin Lord laughed. As soon as he said that, a golden light flashed around his body, and like a storm of swords, a group of Zanpakuto exploded from his body, and in an instant Valletta, Mai Jue, and Helibal, who couldn't defend in time, were sent flying, and the 3 of them were bleeding. At the same time, under the explosion of Jingjin Lord's Zanpakuto, the 100 steps railing on his body was also cut into a pile of fragments, and quickly dissipated in the air. Then, Jingjin Lord turned into a golden sword light, and with the power of the sword, he instantly flew towards Suzu Ito. Suzu Ito's pupils shrank, and she used her flying scythe kick to dodge. After his attack failed, Jingzu transformed back into his human form and slashed horizontally with his katana, bringing out a huge katana that was more than 5 feet long, sweeping towards Kurenai, Uchiha Miko, Toyo, Ito Eriko, Oriana, Suki Amiri, Yayi, and Sakujin's Rina. Doyu was caught off guard, but immediately afterward, there was a crisp, kacha sound. The life-saving necklace on her neck that was given by Ito-sei burst into pieces, releasing a barrier outside her body, protecting her from the slash of the blade light. Doyu flew out into the distance under the slash of the blade light. Even so, Toyo, who was hit by a huge force, couldn't help but spit out a big mouthful of blood, and her face became pale. With Toyo's action, Kurenai and Uchiha Yoshiko immediately reacted. Kurenai's figure flashed as she used substitution jutsu to avoid the attack, while Kurenai's eyes flashed as she twisted the space around her body, diverting Kurenai's katana to another place, causing the attack to hit empty space. Following that, Eriko, Oriana, and Emilai Tosaki didn't hesitate to use golden light magic, and arrows to attack Kizu Overgod. In an instant, a dazzling golden shockwave, a shadow blade, and an arrow landed on Jing Jin's body. Bang! Puff! Boom! Overgod Jing Jin's body trembled as he retreated backwards, several new wounds appearing on his body. Then, Uchiha Yoshiko, who had been facing Jingzu all this time, turned her scarlet eyes and looked at Jingzu. Instantly, Master God Jing Jin felt the scenery around him change as he was pulled into a strange space. It was a world where mortals, heroes, and deities could sleep, the dream realm. In this way, they didn't have to worry about Ketsu Overgod for a short time. "Where is that guy?" Erika, who was about to step forward to support Ketsu Overgod, asked curiously. "I sent him to the dream realm. He won't be able to break the space and escape from there in a short time," Uchiha Yoshiko said lightly. "Well done, Yoshiko," Suzu Ito praised. Then, everyone's eyes turned and fell on Thunder God Kanzu, who was shining in midair. "I didn't expect you bitches to be so capable. You actually defeated Ketsu Overgod," Kanzu said lightly. "Don't worry, we will immediately send you to accompany him," Wei Zi sneered. "No, you won't have the chance," Kanzu said, then his hand loosened, and Futsu no Mitama fell straight to the ground, leaving only half of the blade and the hilt exposed. After that, Futsu Mitama suddenly blossomed with a dazzling golden light, causing Eriko and the others to have no choice but to close their eyes and spread the light. After a moment, when Eriko and the others opened their eyes again, the scene in front of them had completely changed. The space was burning with a red fire, exuding a terrible heat. Cracks could be seen all over the ground. Streams of crimson molten iron flowed through the cracks like blood. A large number of long and short swords were stuck in the ground like trees in a forest. They buzzed as the hot wind blew past them from time to time. "This is..." Erika's expression changed slightly as she looked around and said, "It's the sword domain." Qingqiu Courtyard's Hui Na, who was also a sword god, sighed and said, "It's so powerful. Hui Na feels that her strength is being suppressed, and she can't use it at all. Reinhardt is trembling." Erika, who retracted her gaze, looked at her beloved sword that was still trembling in her hand and said, "Silver Grandmaster Craftsman too." Liliana on the side agreed. "My Lion King is fine, probably because of Ho." Yellow Sand said. As for the others, Suzu Ito, Eriko, and Yi had already put away their swords, so there was no need to worry. Helibal's Zanpakuto was a manifestation of his soul. Although it was a sword, its attributes were very different from a sword's. It was also not suppressed by the sword domain, so there was no need to worry about it. The remaining people were all swordless. Their power attributes did not include swords, so they were not affected by the domain of swords. At most, due to the difference in their realms, they would feel a little sluggish in using their power and lack of power. Chapter 2270. Hui Na, you're the only sword god here. Do you have any good suggestions? Erika asked. Hui Na doesn't have any good ideas. Hui Na said helplessly, but before that, it's better for us to stand back to back. Hui Na thinks that those swords inserted in the ground are definitely not just for show. Hui Na is right. Those swords are very dangerous, Liliana said as she looked at the swords in a daze. Did you see it? Erika, who knew that Liliana's astral vision ability had become stronger since she was promoted to Shinzu, hurriedly asked. I saw some. Liliana, who came back to her senses, said. Well, everyone form a defensive circle back to back and pay attention to the surrounding situation. We na, Oriana, Tucci, and Kurenai, you four stand in the center circle. Eriko Ito said decisively. Yes. Everyone responded. Following which, everyone formed a circle around each other, their gazes cautiously scanning their surroundings. But almost at the next moment when they formed a defensive circle, the surface of all the swords and katanas inserted obliquely in the ground in the field lit up, and from the real katana, an energy saber that was exactly the same as the real katana appeared. Then they turned together, and the blades were aimed at Eriko and the others, and then turned into golden lights, shooting towards Eriko and the others. In an instant, these golden lights flew in front of Eriko and the others. Seito and Eriko made hand seals and released a defensive barrier around everyone. Suzu Ito used Kido's spacebreaker. Uchiha Yoshiko used her Sharingan to distort the space around everyone, causing the direction of the swords to deviate. Shino waved his hand and created a solar firewall. Yi opened his dragon eyes, and then used his telekinesis ability to materialize a small katana to block the swords flying in front of him. Hellable created a huge waterspout to wrap everyone around. Karen also used the hurricane she created to envelop everyone. Charmy created a huge ball of lightning in front of her. Erika turned Reinhardt into a huge shield with 3 sides high and 2 meters wide. She stood in front of him and Liliana. Wei Zi, Mai Jue, Jianshan Yellow Springs, and Valletta used their agile reflexes to deflect the sword light. In short, everyone used their own unique abilities to block the sword lights that shot out like rain in the sword domain. This won't work, Zhen Yi said with a frown. Then, he turned his head slightly. He asked Yi, Yi, can you break through this domain? That won't do. The opponent's strength is higher than mine. I can't borrow the power of the Eye of the Dragon to return to the past and defeat him, Yi said, shaking his head as he looked up into the void. Then it seems that there's only one way, Zhen Yi sighed. You mean? Suzu Ito seemed to have thought of something. Zhen Yi nodded, confirming Suzu Ito's conjecture. Indeed, this is the only way to break through this domain. Suzu Ito nodded in agreement. What are you talking about? Huina asked curiously. Everyone, pay attention. Mother, Zhen Yi, and I will open our own domains to offset the power of this sword domain. When the time comes, use your strongest power to attack one point of the domain and try to break it in one go. Suzu Ito said as she turned to whisper to her mother, Eriko. Okay, the others agreed. Then, Eriko Ito, Suzu Ito, and Zhen Yi, who received the others' response, opened their respective domains. In an instant, 3 peculiar power spaces, 2 gold and 1 black, appeared in the domain of swords. They blended and resisted each other, creating a disorderly thunder and lightning due to the friction between the laws. They constantly bombarded the domain of swords, the domain of sword of Tsubasa, the domain of son of Ito Eriko and Shinya, and the domain of death of Ito Rin. In the confrontation of the 3 different powers of the rules, the most powerful sword domain's power instantly deviated and became unstable. The sword light inside began to become void, no longer as fast and powerful as before. Seeing this, Hellable, Charmy, Karen, and Oriana, as well as Uchiha Yoshiko and Yi, didn't hesitate and immediately urged the power in their bodies to the extreme as previously agreed. All of them simultaneously launched their attacks at a single point in the sky. In an instant, terrifying thunder balls and water guns full of high pressure and high temperature, as well as high-speed rotating hurricanes and dense air bombs, appeared. There was also the dark fire of Amaterasu, and a huge sword light that seemed to be able to cut the sky appeared together in the sky. Then, there was a violent explosion, and a violent energy fireball bloomed from the sky. It was like an artificial sun, emitting a dazzling light. The light and the fireball dissipated quickly. It only took 3 to 4 seconds for the sky to reappear. However, at this time, a huge gap appeared in the originally crimson and dim sky, revealing the normal sky and sunlight outside. The edges of the cracks were covered with pitch-black lines that slowly extended outward. From time to time, streaks of bright lightning would flash out from within. "Let's go," Suzu Ito said loudly. Then, everyone moved together, supporting each other, and turned into a colorful stream of light, returning to Takamagara from the gap. But then, a large number of sword lights shot toward them like raindrops. At this time, Karen turned around, swung her arm, and created a thick tornado, sucking all the sword lights into the tornado. But the next moment, more sword lights flew out from behind everyone, once again enveloping everyone, breaking the defense and enchantment they hurriedly set up, and piercing through their bodies. Puff, 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 puff. Fortunately, everyone had the life-saving items left by Seito. Although they couldn't completely resist the dense sword light attack, everyone took the opportunity to avoid being hit in their vital parts and didn't die on the spot. They were all injured and fell to the ground. Bam 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 bam. Ha 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 ha, bitches, you've been captured. Lord Jingzu, who was suspended in the air, looked down at Eriko and the others lying on the ground and laughed. Then, he turned his head and joked to Kenjutsu, who withdrew his sword domain. "Budu, these are my spoils of war. You're not allowed to snatch them." A guy who only knows how to take advantage of others," Kenjutsu said in a displeased tone. "Ha ha ha ha, you took it seriously? Don't worry, it's also your credit to capture them. I'll leave some for you." Lord Jingzu laughed as he landed on the ground. Kenjutsu didn't speak and also landed. He walked toward Eriko and the others with Lord Jingzu. Eriko and the others were unwilling to be captured, and they forced themselves to get up from the ground. "Are you okay?" Eriko raised her hand to wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth, and asked the people behind her without looking back. "I'm fine. But Huina's injuries are a bit serious. If she isn't treated quickly, I'm worried." Erika, who used healing magic to treat Huina in Qingqiu Courtyard, looked up at Ito Eriko's back and said, "I'm fine. Huina's breath was weak. I like this girl. Budu, don't fight with me for her." Lord Jingzu looked at Huina in Qingqiu Courtyard with appreciation. "No. I also took a fancy to this one," Jian Yulation said in a low voice. "Then we'll do it the old way?" Lord Jingzu said. "Okay." Kenjutsu agreed. "Don't even think about touching Huina." Yi stepped forward and said in a deep voice. Although Mayo didn't say anything, he also stood next to Yi, followed by Hellable, Suzu Ito, Karen UB** cheese sure are unyielding. Lord Jingzu looked at everyone with interest and laughed. "But that's good. I like women like you." After saying that, he moved and came in front of Yi. He turned the long sword in his hand and slashed at Yi's chest with the back of the sword. Yi opened his dragon eyes and predicted Lord Jingzu's move. He clenched his left hand and punched Lord Jingzu's abdomen. Bang! A white light suddenly appeared, and Lord Jingzu was hit so hard that he couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Mayo then waved one hand and burned Lord Jingzu with sun fire. Karen released wildfire to help the fire. Hellable and Suzu Ito released their attacks to stop Kenjutsu, who was about to make a move. Then, Valletta, Maijua, Weizi, and Charmy followed closely behind. In an instant, the scene returned to the initial state of the battle between the two groups. It was a chaotic battle. But in the next moment, Lord Jingzu turned into a golden sword light and flew out of the flames and wind. He flew into the crowd and stabbed and slashed at Oleana, Liliana, and Erika, who couldn't defend themselves in time. He then turned around and attacked Suzu Ito, Eriko, Karen, Mayo, and Yi from behind. Thor Jianyu did the same. He used his superb martial arts skills to injure Valletta and send Wei Zi flying. He also inflicted dozens of wounds on Charmy and Maijua, turning them into 2 bloody figures. He also cooperated with Lord Jingzu to attack the others. Under the tacit cooperation of the two, everyone was once again knocked to the ground in a moment. Moreover, everyone had more wounds on their bodies, and their bodies were covered in blood. Budu, come, cut their tendons so that they won't resist. Jing Jin suggested with a chuckle. At the same time, she raised her knife and cut open the tendons of Karen's hands and feet, who was closest to her. Kenjutsu nodded and also cut the tendons of Wei Zi's hands and feet. Then, the two of them walked one step at a time and did the same to the others. You're courting death. Chapter 2271. Suddenly, a furious roar rang in the ears of Jingjin Overgod and Kenyu Raishin. Before the two of them could react, a huge force suddenly descended upon them and sent them flying away from Eriko and the others. 3W boom. There was a loud roar and bright lightning instantly spread out from Jingjin Overgod and Kenyu Raishin's bodies. I'm sorry I'm late. Seito, who had replaced Jingjin Overgod and appeared beside Eriko and the others, apologized with a face full of anger. It's not too late. Suzu Ito, who was covered in blood and had broken tendons in all four of her limbs, smiled bitterly. Seito did not say anything. He immediately activated the God of Life's authority and created a large amount of pure life energy. He infused it into the bodies of Eriko, Suzu Ito, Yi, Shinya, Karen, Hui Na, Erika, Oriana, Liliana, and Tsuki Meili, healing their injuries. However, it was only a simple recovery. If they wanted to reconnect the tendons in their limbs, Seito would have to at least force the remaining power of the rule of sword and blade out of their bodies. I'll send you back first. Leave the rest to me, Seito said in a deep voice after healing them. Okay. Remember to teach those two bastards a lesson for me. Suzu Ito, whose face had regained some color, nodded and said, Don't worry. I'll capture the two of them alive and bring them back for you to vent your anger. Seito nodded heavily and promised in a deep voice. After saying that, he sent Eriko, Suzu Ito, Shinya, Yi, Karen, Hui Na, Oriana, Erika, Liliana, and Tsuki Meili back to the Rubik's Cube world. Seito then turned around and walked towards Valletta and Charmy. Using the same method as before, he gave them the simplest treatment, and during this process Yi Zichen gave them a simple treatment. Jing Jin Master God and Jianyu Thunder God, who had recovered from the initial shock, did not move. They both stared at Seito with solemn faces. A moment later, after sending Valletta, Wei Zi, Maijua, Charmy, Kaneyama Yomi, Uchiha Yoshiko, Kurinai, and Hellable back to the cube world, Seito turned around and looked at Jingu and Raikami coldly. Imperial God. Imperial God, Jian asked in a deep voice. You want to see her? I'll send you there now. Seito sneered. With that said, Lin Fan's body flashed as he appeared before the Jing Jin Master God. The power of the time laws around him burst forth, forming a turbulent time tempest that slammed out onto the body of the Jing Jin Master God instantly. Boom! Master God Jing Jin's body jerked as he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and was sent flying backwards. Seeing this, Jianyu Thunder God's expression changed. Not daring to hesitate, he hurriedly pushed his power to the extreme and revealed another form of his Thunder God. In an instant, a large amount of lightning appeared around Jianyu Thunder God's body and bombarded the surroundings aimlessly. At the same time, Jianyu Thunder God's aura rose rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it rose from the original Gold Immortal level to the peak of the Gold Immortal level, stirring up the void of Takamagara and creating ripples. Seito, who was being bombarded by lightning, flashed. He dodged past Jianyu Thunder God, and then flashed again, appearing in front of Jing Jin Master God, who had just landed on the ground and had yet to get up from the ground. The heavenly sword appeared in his hand, and he stabbed towards his chest. However, with a ding sound, the heavenly sword in Ito-sei's hand vibrated under the power of the rules. It bounced off Jing Jin Master God's body. Haha, no sword in the world can hurt me. Jing Jin Master God laughed. Then, a divine light flashed around him. His body transformed into a golden spirit saber, and he rapidly flew through the air in a large arc. It shot towards Sei Ito's head like lightning. At the same time, thunder and lightning roared behind Sei Ito, blocking his escape route like a net. It was the 8-colored lightning attack unleashed by Jinyu Thunder God, who had completed his Thunder God transformation. However, Sei Ito, who was in the middle of a pincer attack, did not change his expression at all. His body flashed, and he appeared beside the golden spirit sword that Jing Jin Master God had transformed into. He reached out his right hand and grabbed the sword's hilt. Golden Blade, who was caught by Sei Ito, shone with divine light. He released hundreds and thousands of sharp blade attacks, which were densely packed and slashed towards Sei Ito. Sei Ito swung his arm, and Golden Blade turned into a stream of light and shot towards Jinyu Thunder God, who had turned into a red-skinned Thunder God. At the same time, he retreated quickly, dodging the large amount of blade wind released by Golden Blade. Jinyu Thunder God raised his lightning rod high and blocked Golden Blade, who had lost control of himself. Clang! Golden Blade, which collided with the lightning rod, shook and flew into the air. Jing Jin Master God, who had regained his freedom, immediately removed his transformation and returned to his human form. He held onto his long sword and flew back to Jinyu Thunder God's side. At this moment, Sei Ito's figure appeared again. He appeared behind Jing Jin Master God and Jinyu Thunder God, and he extended his palm forward to perform a unique skill. Heavenly Wheel Dance. In an instant, a huge universe void appeared out of thin air, enveloping Jing Jin Master God and Jinyu Thunder God. Heavenly Wheel Dance was a secret unique skill of the Virgo Saint Seiya. By understanding the truth of the universe, one could create a perfect world, and then bind the enemy into the world that one had created. Anyone who entered the world could not attack, nor could they escape. They could only be bullied by the master of the world. 5 senses deprivation, Sei Ito, who was hidden in the void, said faintly. The next moment, Jing Jin Master God and Jinyu Thunder God, who did not understand what was going on, realized that they had lost their sense of hearing, touch, taste, smell, and vision. Everything in front of them became pitch black. They could not see, hear, or touch anything. It was extremely empty, as if they had been sealed. Then, Sei Ito's voice rang in Jing Jin Master God and Jinyu Thunder God's hearts again. 6 senses deprivation. In an instant, Jing Jin and Jian Eulation's figures became illusory. Their entire existence became illusory and unreal. Only something that should be a thought kept flipping in the pitch-black space of the universe. And Sei Ito, who saw all this, smiled coldly and opened his mouth to say one last word: seal. His goal was not to kill them, but to capture them and draw out their power to strengthen the women behind him. What's more, Suzu Ito and the others still wanted to vent their anger on them. How could he directly use the power of the realm to erase the last traces of their existence? Then, a large amount of golden light appeared out of thin air from the dark void, wrapping around Jing Jin Master God and Jinyu Thunder God's remaining consciousness. However, in Sei Ito's eyes, their physical bodies still existed. They turned into 2 golden statues with a large number of golden Tao patterns on the surface, as if they were completely made of gold. Then, Sei Ito waved his arm and put away Jing Jin Master God and Jinyu Thunder God. At this point, the last resistance in Takamajiehara's Sun God City was declared destroyed. The entire Sun God City fell into Sei Ito's hands. After that, Sei Ito's figure flashed and found the weak Doyo. He took her back to the camp where Cornelia and the army were, and sent Cornelia, the surviving soldiers in the city, and the bodies of the dead soldiers they collected back to the Rubik's Cube world. In this way, without any burdens, Sei Ito did not hesitate. He immediately flew to the sky above Sun God City and raised his right arm to the sky. A huge rock ball with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers, twice the diameter of the entire Sun God City, quickly gathered in the air. Then, as Ito waved his arm, it turned into a huge meteor and fiercely hit Sun God City below. Boom! The meteor fell to the ground, and Sun God City was immediately crushed into ruins by the huge rock ball, deeply buried under the rock ball. The earth rolled over and over like a terrifying wave in a tsunami, pushing in all directions. The land within a radius of nearly 20 kilometers became barren. Dust rose into the air and turned into a huge mushroom cloud, rising straight into the sky. Humph! After doing all this, Ito coldly snorted and flew to the west of Takamajiehara, disappearing into the sky in the blink of an eye. About half a day later, Ito flew out of Takamajiehara and re-entered the starry sky of the universe, continuing to fly forward. Then, after flying for more than a day, a vast and boundless ocean suddenly appeared in front of him. Sure enough, as long as I fly according to the geographical location on Earth, I can directly fly from Takamajiehara to the Earth immortal realm. Seeing the ocean appear, Ito's eyes lit up and he thought to himself, "That's right, Ito's destination was the Earth immortal realm." However, it was not because he wanted to do anything, but purely for traveling. Since he had already come to the upper world, there was no reason for him to go back directly after doing something bad. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well take this opportunity to travel in the upper world and broaden his horizons. He wanted to see what the upper world of the main world was like. However, he somewhat underestimated the vastness of the Earth immortal realm. The ocean alone was as vast as the new Earth, so he flew straight for 7 or 8 days before he finally saw the land. Fortunately, the flight this time was relatively smooth. He did not encounter various monsters blocking his way or individual cultivators fighting like in romance and novels. He flew across the ocean very safely. After that, Ito flew for about half a day and finally stopped on a mountain with no people or monsters. He flashed into the world of the Rubik's Cube and changed into his real body. Yes, his real body. As early as Ito flew halfway out of Takamajiehara, he and his shadow doppelganger switched places and entered the world of the Rubik's Cube to help his mother Eriko and elder sister Suzu Ito dispel the sword energy in their bodies and heal their injuries. Otherwise, Ito would not have so much free time to spend on this boring journey. Chapter 2272. In the following days, Itochu was like an ordinary cultivator in the earthly immortal realm. He traveled around, lived in the wild, and occasionally went to the nearby towns and villages to see the local customs of the earthly immortal realm. However, most of the time, he went to different sects and sections. He secretly peeped at the secret books and records of various elixirs and secret medicines in the name of discussing Taoism. Then, he went to the mountains to dig up medicines, went to the sea to collect treasures, and refined elixirs to enhance the strength of women of the wuxia faction and the cultivation faction. In this way, with Ito's help, in just 1 year, Li Yingqiong, who had the best aptitude, entered the 7th stage of the Golden Core realm. She was about to complete the 9 stages of Huandan and become an immortal. As for Mi Ming Nyang Qiujixian and Li Yingqiong's father, although their progress was slightly slower, their cultivation methods were concise enough and in line with the current situation, so they also made great progress. If it weren't for the fact that he was worried that their excessive progress would cause their foundation to be unstable and temporarily stopped the elixir supply, they might have transcended the mortal world and become false immortals. In addition to them, Tao Wu, Dugu Feng, Song Yuji, Ji Yanran, Zhao Ji, Sun Shangxiang, Lady Hua, and other women who had also received elixirs had also made great progress in their cultivation. They had broken through the limits of their martial arts and were heading toward the martial immortal realm. Of course, while they were making rapid progress, Ito didn't neglect his mother Eriko and elder sister Suzu Ito, who had fought with the Tianjin god system a year ago in Takamagara. After they had fully recovered from their injuries, Ito began to draw out the power of all the gods, including Amaterasu, and instilled it into everyone according to their respective attributes. Under this kind of infusion of power, everyone's godhead immediately began to improve greatly. Among them, his mother Eriko and Zhenyi, who had the sun god attribute, and Hui Na, who had the god of saber and sword attribute of the Qingqiu courtyard, had the most obvious improvement. They rose from their original level to the level of a golden immortal, which was the level of a great divine power god of a small god system. Among them, his mother Eriko and Zhen Yi were ordinary golden immortals / great divine powers. On the other hand, Hui Na of the clear autumn courtyard, who had consumed 2 portions of the divine power of the god of saber and sword, was a peak gold immortal. She was only 1 step away from breaking through the limit and stepping into the realm of primordial like Ito. At the same time, because they had captured enough true gods and false gods this time, Ito had also specially allocated a few gods' powers to other people who had the potential to become gods. For example, Wind, who had inherited the power of storm gauntlets, became the second wind god in the Rubik's Cube world after Karen under the infusion of power. However, Wind's attributes were more inclined toward destructive storms, which was somewhat different from Karen's wind of nature. For example, Pandora, who could be regarded as a demigod and had mastered the power of the small universe, became the god of desire and the snake god under the infusion of power. For example, the 2 sisters Kagura and Chizuru Kagura, who had been baptized by the divine artifact Yata Kagura in the early years, and who had been given the divine artifact Yata Kagura by Ito, became the twin gods under the infusion of power. Another example was Aisha, who had the divine artifact Madonna's smile. Aljet and Jay, who had obtained the 8th sense of the small universe with the help of Ito, also became the god of life and the god of warriors with the help of power and part of the world's power. After that, Ito fed the remaining gods and spirit gods, who could not be used, to the world tree, which was about to give birth to its first child, in the form of food. About 2 months later, the green egg hanging from the world tree suddenly exploded, revealing a female body that was emitting green light. She had white and delicate skin, silver-white hair, and pointed ears. She hugged her knees and curled up like a baby. Immediately afterward, ripples visible to the naked eye spread out from her body and quickly crossed the entire Rubik's Cube world, as if announcing her birth to the world. At that time, Ito, who was visiting a certain sect, noticed the message from the Rubik's Cube and immediately left the sect. He entered the Rubik's Cube world in a secret place and appeared in front of the female body. At the same time, the female body moved slightly and stretched out naturally, facing Ito and opening her eyes. It was also at this time that Ito could see the full appearance of the female humanoid creature. She was very tall, about 1.8 meters tall, with a slim and slender figure, and white and delicate skin. Her entire body was cut with the most precise golden ratio, and there were no flaws at all. Even the private parts of her lower body did not have the slightest bit of foreign matter, which made her look like a white tiger. She had an oval face, and her facial features were extremely well proportioned. She had the gentle beauty of the East, but also the profound beauty of the West. She was exceptionally beautiful. Even a very confident woman would feel ashamed after seeing her face, and would not have the slightest desire to compare herself. Coupled with her bright golden pupils and long silver hair, as well as the noble and inhuman aura that emanated from her body from time to time, she looked like a divine being. As expected of an existence that was nurtured by many gods, divine creatures, and legendary creatures. She has the same strength as me as soon as she was born. Looking at the woman in front of him, Ito could not help but sigh in his heart. However, on second thought, Seito also understood. After all, the other party was the first life born from the world tree. She had received the most nutrition and attention, so it was normal for her to be so powerful at birth. Moreover, she might be the manager of the next life born from the world tree, an existence similar to the spokesperson of the world tree. In Western legends, she would be the spirit of the world tree, the tree of the tribe, an existence like the main god. It would be abnormal if she was not strong. Father! The woman opened her mouth and called out in a hoarse voice. What did you call me? Seito was stunned. Father. After familiarizing herself a little, the woman said in a smooth voice that was many times better than before. When did I become your father? Seito looked speechlessly at the naive-looking woman in front of him and asked. Mother told me, the woman said. Then, she turned her head and looked at the world tree with admiration. Okay, I understand. What's your name? Seito looked up at the withered leaves of the world tree and said helplessly. The natural spirit light around it had weakened a lot. Great, he had not even had a child with his woman, and he had already had a cross-species union with a tree. At the same time, he waved his arm and channeled a substantial amount of Kanade Imuchi and a portion of the world's power into the world tree that had lost a lot of its aura due to the birth. I don't have a name yet. Mother said father should be the one. The woman retracted her gaze and looked at Seito while blinking her eyes. Sha 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 sha. The leaves of the world tree that had been nourished by the Kanade Imuchi and the world's power trembled and sent out a thought wave. Since Mother wants me to name you, then you'll have the surname Chin. As for your name, since you were born from the world tree, then you'll be called Mu Ling. It suits your background, Seito said after some thought. Yes. Chen Muling nodded with a joyful expression. Come, put on this shirt first, then tell me what abilities you have. At this moment, Seito flipped his hand and took out a white Greek-style dress made of silk. He handed it to Chen Muling and said. Chen Muling reached out and took the long dress. She didn't ask how to put it on and skillfully put it on. Clearly, even though she was just a newborn, the world tree had already imparted some basic knowledge to her. I have roughly 5 abilities. 1 is the power to control time and space, 1 is the power to nurture life, 1 is the power to control souls, 1 is the power to control plants, and 1 is the power to communicate with animals, Chen Muling replied. She really is like the ancient elves in the legends. Seito raised his eyebrows and thought to himself. What do you plan to do next? Do you want to come with me or stay here? Seito then asked. I want to stay here and take care of Mother, Chen Muling said after some thought. That's good. If you need anything, just tell the void. The Rubik's Cube will help you. Seito nodded and agreed. Okay, Father. Chen Muling smiled. Seito, who was a little uncomfortable when he heard the word father, flipped his hand and took out a book of elves that had the highest communication authority in the Rubik's Cube world and could directly connect to the secret library. He tossed it to Chen Muling and said, Use it to learn the knowledge inside when you're free. After that, he used teleportation to escape from the world tree and returned to the city. After a long time, he gradually got used to the fact that he had a big daughter. I can't let my daughter surpass me like this. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. But then he thought of his daughter's strength and her extraordinary aptitude. Seito raised his eyebrows and a strong sense of urgency rose in his heart. Therefore, he did not hesitate. After a few simple words with everyone, he set off again and returned to the area of the Rubik's Cube world. He activated the law of time and used the difference in the flow of time to devour the remaining divine power of Odin in his hand. As for the travel operations in the outside world, he once again handed it over to his shadow clone. And the shadow clone, who took over the travel task from Seito, did not make any changes. It continued to follow the original rhythm of entering the mountains and visiting the sections. When it saw monsters, it did not care if they were good and killed if they were bad. It collected herbs and peeked at pill formulas, providing help to everyone in the Rubik's Cube world in their cultivation. In this way, unknowingly, several years passed in the outside world. On this day, in the Rubik's Cube world, along with the stabilization of the maximum time dislocation in the central area, a terrifying aura that was so powerful that it instantly enveloped the entire Rubik's Cube world suddenly erupted from the central area, exuding a terrifying aura. All the residents in the Rubik's Cube world were shocked and looked up at the sky in horror. However, this situation did not last long. Almost when the residents of the Rubik's Cube world thought that the end of the world had come, the terrifying aura quickly disappeared in the Rubik's Cube world. If the clouds above the various worlds were not torn to pieces when the aura erupted, everyone would have mistakenly thought that what they felt just now was fake. Ha 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 ha. Then, exaggerated laughter echoed over the central area of the Rubik's Cube world. Father! Chen Muling, who appeared in front of Sei Ito in a flash, called out with a puzzled face. Did I scare you? Noticing that his behavior was a little excessive, Sei Ito stopped laughing and looked at Chen Muling embarrassedly. No. Chen Muling shook her head slightly and said, Father, what made you so happy? Nothing, just a breakthrough in the realm. Sei Ito smiled. Chen Muling looked up and down at Sei Ito and guessed with a surprised face, Father broke through to the Zenith Heaven realm? Yes. Sei Ito nodded affirmatively. As Sei Ito said, after devouring Odin's divine power and also devouring all the power of Hades, who he really couldn't find a suitable person to give it to, and almost exhausted the world power produced by the Rubik's Cube world over the years, he finally broke through 2 levels and stepped into the strongest realm below the Sage realm, the level of Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. It could be said that from now on, even in the Earth Immortal world, he could completely do whatever he wanted. Congratulations, Father, for taking another step forward. Chen Muling congratulated with a face full of joy. However, at this moment, Chen Muling saw her father's expression suddenly change, and his brows furrowed tightly. She couldn't help but wonder, Father? I didn't expect it to be like this. After a moment, Sei Ito sighed. What's wrong, Father? Chen Muling asked curiously. Nothing, I have to leave for a while. Sei Ito got up and said. Chen Muling nodded. After saying that, Sei Ito's figure flashed and disappeared from the room in the central area, appearing in the void of the Rubik's Cube world. Rubik's Cube, how much time do we have left in that world? Sei Ito asked loudly. What if I don't reach my current level before that world is destroyed? Sei Ito was silent for a moment, and then asked again. Your production is really generous. Sei Ito chuckled. As expected of a high-level person, your realm is really high. Sei Ito sighed. I think I'm not the only one. Then, Sei Ito asked again. Then do you know the situation of the others? Sei Ito asked curiously. Then, after completing the mission, can we still come back? After a pause, Sei Ito asked again. Okay, what should I do now? After a moment of silence, Sei Ito asked. Sei Ito nodded and burst out all his strength as asked. Then, a huge vortex suddenly appeared in the void of the Rubik's Cube world. Like a black hole, it swallowed all the power gushing out of Sei Ito's body and concentrated it until it finally formed a bright spot of light, and like a laser cannon, it suddenly shot out. After that, there was a boom, and the void of the entire Rubik's Cube world was blocked. Immediately afterward, the Rubik's Cube world hidden in the inexplicable dimension began to compress to the limit. It changed from the original strange existence to a small Rubik's Cube the size of a ping-pong ball, exactly the same as the Rubik's Cube pendant Sei Ito bought on the street. It turned into a stream of light and shot into the black hole that suddenly appeared in front of the inexplicable dimension after an unknown amount of time. With a flash of light, The miniaturized Rubik's Cube appeared in a strange universe. Then let's begin. Save this universe that is about to be destroyed. Ito said softly as he looked at the familiar yet strange universe through the power of the Rubik's Cube. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.